Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. We are here tonight to talk about all things budget, also with a brief discussion on the recent reported increase in property crimes in our neighborhood. Before we begin, I hate to even bring this up, but as it's mid-December, we are at risk for more potential devastating flooding. At this point, we're nervous, we're not scared. There's nothing in the forecast that's a blinking red light on the dashboard, but it's very, I'm not going to use the term fluid, but it's very variable. So keep an eye on the forecast. There is a potential for more significant flooding. Before we begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Okay, Josh, board, would it make sense to shuffle the agenda as Chief Cambridge is not here yet? Should we maybe do B first and then A?
I'm perfectly okay with that. He will.
He will. Okay, so let's do that. So are we ready to talk about a review of employee benefits?
Sure.
Okay.
Speaking only for myself, I don't know.
Josh, did you want to lead this discussion? Welcome, Connie. Good to see you in person.
So in 2022, we had a compensation study done by GovHR. Looked at primarily compensation of all town employees. In that study, they did have a brief section on employee benefits. But as we've lost some staff this fall, we wanted to look back at employee benefits. So we had to take another look at things like leave time, health insurance, town contribution to health insurance opt-outs. So they did an update to the study specifically focused on the benefits. So the detailed studies included in the packet. He's here. Do we want to stop and go to police?
I would actually.
Yeah, because it sort of.
There are a number of people who are dialed in.
Yep,
right
let's,
here.
let's stop and go to police. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to stick a pin in employee benefits. Chief Cambridge, you're good to go? We just shuffled the agenda since you weren't here, we switched A and B, but since you're here now, we'll go back to discussion of the recent break-ins in our area if you're ready to go.
Yes, thank you.
Card?
David, should we draw people's attention to the statement from our chief on the recent break-ins? This was, I think, Front Porch Forum website, and it's an attachment
Facebook.
Here.
And then we copied it to Front Porch Forum.
Yeah, and it was in Facebook as well.
For people who haven't seen it, it's a.
Yeah, probably not a bad idea.
The Chief, we're just bringing the statement that you posted up on the screen here. It was in our packet for the meeting tonight as well. Chief, I don't know if you wanted to read that or speak to that or just
Summarize it or
summarize where we are and what we can do.
I just thought it was really important to not when things get bad in a community, it's easy to try to place blame or point fingers, and the reason I posted it was because I wanted for people to take precaution. I think that it's been a long time coming, and I've been seeing things get progressively worse in both towns. And I think there's a lot of agencies, and I'm not pointing to any particular one, that would have just not said anything. And what ends up happening is people continue to keep doors unlocked. People continue to think things are safe, and I don't think that. I think there's a lot of places that are worse, but things are not like they were 5 years ago or even 10 years ago.
Go ahead, Bard.
Chief, one thing you mentioned, we have had a couple of conversations in the last month or two, about trends in stolen vehicles. You know, what it was like maybe 5 years ago to what you saw then versus what you see now.
So I actually was just looking at the numbers on that. So I ran the numbers to go back to and I still have to look at various things. Like I just ran theft of automobiles, and I was able to go back to 2020 to when we started our new computer database. So we're talking about uh, probably September forward of 2020 until now. The town of Richmond and the town of Heinsberg, between whenever we started the new system in 2020 and uh, basically 2023, only had five total stolen motor vehicles, not to include buses or excavators or motorcycles or anything like that. Just your typical motor vehicle. There were five of them. Three were in Richmond and two were in Heinsberg, and they were all in 2023. As of 2024, and again, these are just preliminary numbers, the number jumped to 28 for both towns.
That's a sobering statistic.
So again, there could be a couple of repeats in there. I really have to go through it a little better, but there's no doubt about it. 2024 saw a huge jump in stolen motor vehicles.
And is this a trend that is observable in neighboring communities besides Richmond and Heinsberg?
It is. I mean, on Sunday, one of our officers went out looking for. We had found on Saturday night, we found the silver truck we were looking for. Our officers went up. It was reported to Colchester Police. We found out it was in Winooski. Our officers went up to Winooski. We followed it. We followed the tow truck back to Heinsberg, and then tonight with the owner, we went through it because there's presumably stolen things in that truck. Pretty much all of the vehicles that we've recovered have multiple stolen items that we're trying to find a home for. And then Sunday morning, one of our officers, based on something that happened in Heinsberg, went just over the line into Moncton, and I believe it was one of the Richmond cars that we were looking for was in someone's driveway. It's a house that in Moncton that's known to us. And while he was there, he observed two other vehicles that looked out of place and ran the VIN numbers on those. They didn't have any plates. He ran the VIN numbers on those and they came back stolen. Well, they didn't come back to anything. He ended up calling the dealership because they weren't even reported yet. Turns out they were stolen that morning from Montpelier, and they were brand new Kias, hadn't even been sold yet. So the other communities it's happening all around us. Huntington, Starksboro, Moncton, and I mean it's been going on for a while. I don't know to what extent, but it's been going on for a while in Shelburne as well.
Now, you outlined this in your statement, but maybe just review things people can do to help deter these thefts.
I think the number one thing is there hasn't been some elaborate method to getting into vehicles. We've seen all summer long. We've got a few people that have said, "Hey, this may sound odd, but my ashtray is missing," and it's people going through cars. They'll take change, they'll take tools, and if your keys are in there in the ignition, they'll take your vehicle. So I think the biggest thing right now is don't leave the keys in your car. And if I was to say what the biggest thing that is a help to us and would be a help to any homeowner is get a Ring camera or a Nest, or there's various other cameras out there. They're not very expensive. The technology is cheap now. And it's not really for after the fact. It's more for if somebody's walking up your walkway, they knock on your door, people want to know if you're home or not. And if you answer that camera or you're able to say, hey, somebody's at my house, I'm going to call the police. Uh, Somebody comes to my house, my phone dings, and I can immediately, ask what they're doing there. So I think that's probably one of the bigger things. And then we all need to sort of just get in a better habit of keeping our doors locked, myself included. I live in Richmond, keeping our doors locked and windows, and not to be to sort of eliminate a lot of those crimes of opportunity.
Any questions or comments for Chief Cambridge? June?
June Heston, I live in Southview, and so in
June.
addition to the,
There's no mic there. Could you
Oh.
come up?
I'm sorry. June Heston from Southview. In addition to the thefts of motor vehicles, there's been, we got an email in our neighborhood about a backpack that was found in some bushes in between houses that had needles, syringes, and a license plate in it. As a person who walks alone a lot in that neighborhood, I kind of want to follow up to know, are we safe just being out walking? Because it's clear that this crime spree is oftentimes related to drug use, and now we have this happening in our neighborhood. So I just want to know, will we get a follow-up on this?
None of our incidents have been people walking and getting assaulted or anything like that. Everything that we've had happen has been, again, these crimes of opportunity. And yes, it usually is related in some way, shape, or form to addiction. But as far as I'll put myself in the place, or my family, I would have no issues with, and things could always change, of course, but I would have no issue with people walking through the village, or I still think in that sense, Richmond's still a very safe place. But people are looking for opportunity to steal things, sell things, and get money for whatever, including drugs. In none of the cases that we've had so far, and it doesn't seem to be any trend toward that, in none of the cases that we've had are anyone looking to hurt someone. And then to go back to June's point, the needle thing has been for years. It's one of those things that it's not going to go away. We respond multiple times a year to the cemetery and to various places in the towns to pick up needles. It's been happening for the last decade that I've been part of.
Jay?
Chief, and other people. I am not aware of any active neighborhood watch groups in Richmond. If there are some, please, people correct me. But I understand that there is formal training for neighborhood watch groups available from some agency or department in the state. Have you looked into, or has anybody on this call looked into getting training and forming a neighborhood watch for some of these neighborhoods?
Actually, Josh and I were just talking about that this morning. I have not. That's usually something that I know before my time in Heinsberg, 2003 or 4, there were, and in the 90s, there were a bunch of various neighborhood watches. Other than the town putting up signs, I don't know how much involvement the police department has. But it's certainly something that we are going to look into. And if there's any way that the police department can help with that or help facilitate that, of course we will.
Okay, the reason I bring it up is because there have been anecdotal stories of people who didn't really know what they were doing, formed a neighborhood watch, confronted criminals directly, got shot, unpleasant things like that. And there are organizations The National Sheriff's Association has a National Neighborhood Watch training program, for example, that can train people on how to do a neighborhood watch safely. And that might be something that the town could, sponsor the training for people to make sure they did get adequately trained.
Yeah, and Jen, I looked at it a little bit this afternoon. It looks like you also have to have it affiliated with a law enforcement agency, so there would be a tie to law enforcement. And they made a distinction that it's different than, there's a different type of organization that kind of voluntarily assists police in investigations, and they made a distinction that this wouldn't be that. This would be more just relaying information about things you see. I tried to get into it to see, like, do they set up like patrols or people are on duty? I didn't spend a lot of time on the website. It might be there. There was a lot of information. I didn't see like sort of like a best practices or a guide sheet, but there's probably some more information there if we dug a little bit deeper.
Okay. I won't go down the anecdotal route all night, but there is, if you Google it, there's quite a lot of references to neighborhoods that have neighborhood watch signs up. The signs do more to deter than just generic security agency signs.
Yeah.
But if somebody is debating which neighborhood to rob, the one that has conspicuous neighborhood watch signs will be somewhat less likely. So it's something I think we should follow up on.
Lisa? Oh, sorry, Bart.
Hi, yeah, about 30 years ago, I guess now, we lived in Pennsylvania, a larger community than Richmond. We had a group called Crime Watch, which is similar to what you're talking about. And the idea was exactly just observe and report and let the professionals take care of anything that, any direct intervention. And it worked really well. We were about 20 miles north of Pittsburgh, and criminals had a couple of interstates to escape on or come in on and so forth. And our neighborhood never had an incident that I know of that was anything above just, petty. And I don't know if the credit should go to the watch group or not, but I think it's an effective thing.
Thank you, Lisa. Bard?
So, since we have a short period of time, I suspect we'll kick some of these cans down the road for a future agenda item. So that might be one that I'll call out. If we could do a follow-up on what does it take? What is a neighborhood watch in Vermont? How does it work? How do we coordinate with the police chief in terms of next steps and have that as a future agenda item? The other one that seemed obvious to me, both in speaking with the chief and reading the document that he created, is some sort of follow-up when our officers are arresting people, and then a week later they arrest them again for the same crime, and then maybe a week after that they arrest them again for the same crime. It makes one think that the current system is not effective at deterring the same people from doing the same crimes over and over. So that might lead us to some conversations with the state's attorney, legislators. I actually thought also of the Vermont Department of Health Division of Substance Use Programs, where they do actually substance use treatment. So what are the evidence-based practices for people who are stealing to support an opioid addiction? I also looked up evidence-based practice for crime prevention, and curiously, at least historically, one of the identified evidence-based practices is not to incarcerate people for modest property crimes. And yet here we are not incarcerating people and not reducing crime that way either. So that might be another follow-up to a conversation that's broader, sort of downstream from the arrest and investigation. What happens to people and how do we prevent some of those people from committing the same crimes for the same reasons?
Jennifer?
Thank you. First, I want to thank Chief Cambridge and his police department, because his officers responded when my son's car was the one that was stolen out of our driveway Thanksgiving morning, and they were amazing in their response and super supportive despite what they were going through. So I just want to really thank your officers, who are great. I also am the director of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services. So I know a ton about what is out there in terms of the best practices and all of these different pieces. And I do think that there is a feeling that there's really nothing happening. And I'm an attorney myself, practicing a while ago, not anymore. But I do think that it's important to think about, um, how we think about holding people accountable. And I'm sure Chief Cambridge doesn't think about, this, he's got so much going on. And is this something that he's going to really pursue to the end of the line? I know that he's not. But for my son and for our family, this was a devastating loss. And yes, he made a teenage mistake. He came home late and he was tired. It was the night of Thanksgiving. He left his keys in the car. They had a great old time in his car, trashed it completely, inside and out. And I don't have the Cadillac insurance, so we're out a lot of money. And this was his first like gift as a driver. So I think that these are important issues, and I do think that some of my neighbors keep their cars open because they're concerned that people are just going to smash the windows in. So I think there's that to think about, is like, how safe do we actually feel? And my girls don't want to take my dog for a walk at night because they don't feel safe. So I think those are real issues that our community needs to think about, is, that safety issue. And we can do a neighborhood watch. I know my neighbor across the street, he came in about 1:15. He's a nurse. And he got in, he was like, wow, he told me the next day, yeah, Jen, I didn't feel it was right outside your house, but I didn't know what to do because my kids don't party. But he was like, there was a party of kids that just came out of the car. And he didn't feel safe confronting them. So what would I even do in that situation? What would he do? He's a man twice the size of me. What would he do? He didn't feel safe coming out. And what would I do if they were in my driveway? I wouldn't do anything. And so it's just thinking about, we can have the watch and be as helpful as we can. And I know we gave Chief Cambridge a lot of information about these people using my son's cards. But what would we do as a neighborhood if we're seeing something like that? He sat in his car because he was like, I don't feel safe coming out and confronting these people because I don't know if they have a weapon. I don't know what they're doing. So, he reported that to Chief Cambridge. And so I'm just trying to think about what we're asking. I mean, certainly, yes, we can be safer. My son could have been safer. Absolutely. That was a silly mistake on his part, but does it warrant an $8,000 loss? No, it doesn't. And they were not drug users. They certainly had fun in his car, but thankfully, I guess, I mean, I don't want him in that car anymore. But it's just really important to think about what this means to all of us in terms of how we feel.
So going back to the neighborhood watch, even the name neighborhood watch is just that, a watch. It's not neighborhood security. The best thing I could say for any situation that anyone in Richmond feels uncomfortable about, or there may be a danger, is to be a good witness and please don't confront anyone. We've had 2 situations in the last month of one was a woman that confronted somebody that had taken her motorhome, and another on Richmond Road, which is Heinsberger in Richmond, where her vehicle was stolen the night before, and she just happened to pull out and see, she was in her extra car, and she happened to pull out and see her car in front of her, and she confronted them. And in almost every situation that we've ended up arresting the person, which has been, we've made a lot of arrests, and there's almost always stolen guns involved. So please, no one confront anyone. Even if you see your car, let us know. Let us pull the car over. Let us confront the people. Unfortunately, it's had a snowballing effect. A lot of almost all of the individuals that we've arrested are not allowed to have guns. However, if there's so many people that have left firearms in vehicles and they've taken them and now they're armed in that way. Yes, that's all I have. The other thing is we are being proactive. I think probably more than your typical agency. If there's a vehicle in either of the towns, we're looking for it. We're out there actively trying to find it, and we're writing search warrants. We're doing, we're even checking outside of the towns in areas that we know, like the incident that I just said that happened on Sunday. So our team it really is a credit to them, how hard they're trying, because we understand. I understand it's really a violation, having something taken from you. It's not something, it's very personal, and it's not something that is easily forgotten. To them, it's not anything. Again, someone stealing a car, it's an opportunity, but it's easy for the person to take it very personally. And then the other thing I think is I don't really, everybody needs to do what they need to do, but I don't really, I'm not really in favor of this kind of San Francisco approach to leaving doors open. There's a reason that they do that. It's because there's a lot of tourists, and the idea is people are breaking windows to steal luggage and things that are in the car. In these particular situations, they're probably not gonna break windows and cause a commotion for some change or to see if there's keys in the car. Best thing to do is for everybody to keep their vehicles locked.
Thanks, Chief. Jennifer, thank you for coming and sharing. Really sorry that you and your family have had to go through this, but working through a solution takes a lot of collaboration and community effort. So thank you for coming and sharing.
Well, certainly, and I want to thank again, Chief Cambridge. His department was really, really supportive. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that.
Any other questions or comments for Chief Cambridge? Okay. Chief, thanks for coming and speaking to us, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. I wish I could have been there in person today. My neighbors are there's 3 cars stuck in my driveway before about a half hour ago. So
Thank you. Any final thoughts before we move on? Bard?
David, just to follow up, I do think it's worth not only the neighborhood watch, but a follow-up with the downstream, if you will, like Sarah George legislators, the Division of Substance Use Programs, and maybe we can talk about that at a future date, given the time.
Thanks, Bard. Okay, let's go on to review of employee benefits and the employee benefits survey.
All right.
So in 2022, we had a compensation study conducted by GovHR, which is a third-party organization that does a lot of analysis for municipalities. In that survey, they did include some benefits information, but as we've had some more questions about, are we offering the right amount of leave time? Are we offering the competitive health insurance, or what's comparable towns doing for health insurance contributions? We asked them to provide an update. They've certainly currently changed names to MGT. I think they were either bought out or merged with another company. But I was able to get the same contact I had, and she had someone who was working with her complete this report. So the report's included in the packet. It dives into leave time, health insurance, a few other topics as well. Overall, I think that, you know, as you look through them, a lot of them are saying that we're sort of in the average to above average range as far as what we offer. So nothing really jumped out at me as like, oh, we really need to catch up in a certain area. I think that having this is going to be helpful too, that, you know, as specific questions arise, we can kind of go back through this report and say, well, here's some current data. I should also note that they use the same towns that they started with in the survey last year, which was based on comparable municipalities that they do based on geography, grand list, population. They have a number of factors they put into this. And they also reached out to all Chittenden County towns as they ended up doing in the survey for wages as well. So trying to find as much similarity in the comparable communities as possible.
Thanks, Josh. Questions, comments? Art or Jay?
The main question that I have is, we lost a number of the highway department to a neighboring town. And I know we've discussed this in the past. I don't just know we've got a large number of people here tonight who may not be familiar with the details. What specifically was Heinsberg able to offer that we don't have?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that were at play there. I mean, one of them was a promotion for one employee, and I think that seemed to be, you know, you're going to take that. I think,
Sure.
you know, had a chance to go be the foreman, so that seemed to make sense. The other two, I know that I think they started out with a little bit more vacation time there than even like the survey would show. So I think that they kind of like gave them a little bit more. I know that was certainly a factor for at least one of them. There are some bonuses that are offered. I don't think the data came back that shows that they routinely offer bonuses in Heinsberg, but in that moment in time for highway departments, they certainly did offer some additional bonuses, which was attractive. Even though it feels like pay range, we sort of got to about average with them, about the same. I think that it was a lot of it was, you know, the additional bonus, there was additional leave time. And, you know, in talking with them, some of them were like, well, you know, we like working with Dylan. He's going over to be the foreman, and, you know, we've got a little bit more of this or that over there. And so we're gonna make a change. So I don't think that there was like one really driving factor. And actually, it's interesting to look at. But actually, I think that they covered domestic partners for health insurance, and we did not. I think that was a factor maybe for one. I think Heinsberg covers 85% of health insurance, and we cover 90. So in that respect, it was a little bit better if you stayed in Richmond.
And if I recall on that topic, most towns do cover 100%. We are actually an outlier by doing 90, aren't we?
I don't know that most cover 100%. If you look at the data, I think that, you know, looking at it, I think that, you know, we've included the LCT data as well for the budget. You know, it looked like the majority of towns were 90, 95, or 100. So I think we're in the good spot there. You start getting into 85, 80 or lower, the percentage I feel like drops a bit.
Okay.
Art?
So two comments that are sort of substance. One is, you know, part of this is the issue of total compensation and cost, and that the combination of wages and all of these things ends up being the total compensation. And so often trade-offs of one thing to one financial benefit to another financial benefit are subject to, you know, the individual's preferences. Another one though, and this has become clear in another organization with which I'm involved, that there appear to be generational differences in preferences in terms of what they want, in terms of, an example here is work-life balance. They want more flexibility. They want more family leave or family medical leave. So part of that is to think, who is it we're trying to recruit and retain? And it may look different if the person's 25 or 55. So that's just a comment. I'm not sure that where that takes us. It's just an observation. And then the other thing I'd say is this report is still labeled draft. So I guess just the question when we get to call it final.
So they sent an initial draft a couple weeks ago. I went through, caught a couple errors, went back to them. They corrected those errors. In the interest of getting it to the board in a timely fashion, I put this forward here. I want to go back to them and say I didn't catch anything else unless somebody else has something that they caught. And then they'll probably finalize it. I don't think there's going to be any other changes, or at least nothing that I caught. All right.
Okay. Are we ready to jump into the draft budget? Sounds like we are. So as we're jumping into this, I think the timing is important. We're seeing an increase in area crimes. At the same time, we're talking about budgeting for law enforcement. So just putting that out there.
So you want me to give, I can
Yeah.
give sort of a quasi presentation / overview that's hopefully helpful and logical to follow. So I'll share my screen here to start off with for the draft of the budget. So this budget is a version that was presented at the last meeting, which includes budget cuts and other budget expense reductions. So that version included a restructuring of the request for increased administrative staffing, a reduction in contribution to reserve funds by recalculating future contributions, reducing police staffing from 4 officers to 3 officers, reducing the request for a 40-hour police administrative assistant to 20-hour police admin, delaying the purchase of a police cruiser, and reduction in equipment purchases in the fire department. That was an iteration of the budget we went through right before Thanksgiving, about 2 weeks ago. That took us from about 21% tax increase from the initial draft down to just under 10%. So the version that I've included, or that we've included, Connie and I've included in the packet this evening, looks at that as our base model, but also looks at some future use of reserve funds for flood expenses to free up some funds that we could put towards the FY26 budget. So we did some work on the expense side and on the revenue side. So one thing that we did do across all departments is we received the rates from our passive insurance, which is our property, liability, casualty, and workers' compensation insurance. We didn't get a detailed breakdown bill that goes department by department yet. So what I did was I based it on the percentages of each department from last year and applied that throughout the budget. So you will see those increases there, and their increases over the FY25 numbers. First thing to start with is when we looked at the draft budget for restructuring the administrative request, we had stated it as $61,907 for the reduction. And we're looking at that closer, it was actually $43,766. So I made that change here. Just to review that, initial request was for a deputy town manager and an assistant to the town manager. This request would eliminate the assistant to the town manager and put them as an assistant. If you think of them sort of in terms of seniority, with like the assistant would be lowest, administrative assistant would be lowest, assistant second highest, and then deputy third highest. So rather than going with a second and third tier, we went with a first and a third tier.
That Josh, sorry, is
Yeah.
it a deputy and an assistant
So
to the town manager?
yeah, the initial request was
No, where are you at now?
where we're at in this version is a deputy and an administrative assistant. So think like third tier, skip the second, go to first tier for additional staffing.
In the budget or right now, Kara?
That's not the
Budget.
police
In the
administrator
budget.
in the budget. That's what this number. So basically, and the way we did this was we kept these sort of salmon lines in here still, because this is still very much in draft, to show like, okay, this was the total request for wages and benefits. If we made that change, it would reduce it by $43,766. The next thing that we did was we looked at fire protection. There was a slight change in that by, I think, like $1,000, the way we were calculating it. So that goes to $38,033 from $38,431. The last iteration of the budget, on my next bookmark here. Okay. So the last iteration of the budget removed $5,000 from the contribution to the fire department safety equipment and gear reserve. This iteration removes a total of $20,000. So you can see that here. This was the original budget of 20. We removed that by doing -20. This results in no contribution to this fund in fiscal year 26, but it still leaves the reserve fund with a projected positive balance through fiscal year 29, with the exception of fiscal year 32, where it would be -$6,000, and fiscal year 39, where it would be -$2,000. So we figured those are far enough out. We have some time to make those up. The last iteration of the budget removed $35,000 from the contribution to the fire capital reserve, which you see we have originally budgeted at $250,000. This iteration takes that down to $45,000, takes it down by $45,000. which leaves a contribution of $205,000, and the projected balance is positive through fiscal year 39 in the capital plan. There's a slight increase in the community outreach program. They're going through some financial restructuring. I think they've lost some other funding. Initial was $11,301, is now up to $12,500. The last iteration of the budget removed $35,000 from the contribution to the highway capital reserve. So it was at 260, and then we would have removed 35,000. This iteration, we looked at it and said, okay, if we took 85,000 out, that still leaves a contribution of 175,000. This leaves the fund with positive balances in FY 26, 27, and 28, and allows for those capital purchases in those years. The fund would go to negative $30,000 in FY 29. So we would need to increase some contributions in future years, or it could potentially be accomplished by using the FEMA money to pay that fund back. Or to not pay it back, we were not borrowing from that fund, but to continue to add to it at a rate that keeps up with the capital plan. This iteration, I'm going to go to the unassigned funds here. So this iteration assumes utilization of the full balance of the Bridge and Culvert Reserve and the Special Project Reserve Fund to go towards flood expenses. So those are the two that are outlined here in blue or highlighted in blue. The Bridge and Culvert Reserve currently has $473,926 in it. We could use that towards culvert expenses from the 2024 flooding, which would then sort of so in this chart here, we added that sort of back into unassigned funds, because initially we're saying, okay, the full expenses are about 1.7, but if we use the reserve fund to pay for that, that reduces the amount that we have to use from unassigned funds. We also looked at borrowing the full 795, 287 from the Special Projects Fund, which is the fund that's essentially the ARPA money that was created by the voters at the special town meeting in early November. So if we borrowed that and used that, that would then leave us with a projection of $22,000 at the of restricted funds, which is still $262,000 under the 15% recommendation going into FY 26. The other thing that we did was look at past savings already in police, knowing that we are understaffed. It's not quite as large as it was last year. We do have one current police officer, and we are still contracting with Heinsberg for coverage for both full and general services and chief services. But the savings through mid-December was $39,672. So similar to the way we budgeted last year, we said, well, let's put that into our projections, sort of like bank that as money that we've already saved.
And we have not stopped hiring efforts.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
So
So
I mentioned that for the people listening, because I believe we've
got a few candidates, and so we're not saying like, let's roll that forward 2 months. You sort of went to date.
I think that's important too, because that explains why every year we don't spend the money, but we continue to budget it because the
Right.
actively hiring and
right. But the key thing here is we're budgeting one fewer empty seats than we have up to this point.
Yeah. So, well, right. So that's definitely key. But as far as this number here, we're looking at like what are savings to date, which is the
Right.
which is the
Okay.
same logistics that the same logic that we used last year was how much do we save to date, not trying to predict the future. So if we make those two changes, the combined total that we're looking at for unassigned and restricted, again, projected at the end of the year would be $782,558, which is $62,045 over 15%. So following our policy on the revenue side, we then add that 62,000 in here. Making sure everybody can follow along, which then gets us to a tax rate increase of 7.12%, which is right here. Hopefully people can kind of follow along at home with where we're at. So just a couple other notes, and then I'll pause for comments from the board. So it's interesting to note when you look at expenses that this is our total budgeted expenses right now as budgeted or proposed, about $4,803,421, which is a 2.29% decrease from the FY 25 budget of $4,915,898. One second, okay, the other thing I wanted to note before I turn it over is, as we went through this, you know, and we're starting to like reduce some funds and know we have to pull away from others. We wanted to do at least a rough projection of, well, when we get paid back by FEMA, we'll get paid back. The first payments we'll get, which we hope to get by this time next year, would be 75% of the highway expenses and 75% of the general expenses. So calculated those here, gets us to about $1.4 million. We know that the first things we would want to pay back are the bridge and culvert reserve of 473,000 and the 795,000 to the special projects reserve. So that's about 1.2 million total, which leaves us with about $110,000 over and above what we think we're going to get paid back from FEMA. So then I started to look at, I just put sort of some notes here on capital. So highway capital reserve, I think would be the next one we'd have to refund, because that would go, it would get to negative in FY29. So we'd want to make sure that we stay on top of that one. The other funds, they either don't go negative or go negative after like FY31, 32. So it allows us, and they're smaller reductions, like we're reducing by 20,000 or 45,000. So it allows us some time to catch up on those. And after the initial 75% from FEMA, there is still some money down the line that we expect to recover from that expenses. Like there's a state match, there's administrative time. So I think there's some more time to replenish those funds. And yeah, I think that's the key points to review on this change of the budget.
Could you go back to that little chart you had a minute ago showing the spending last year versus the one? Yes, that one. So I'd like to point something out. As Josh has pointed out, and I'm just reiterating, the change in the overall bottom line in terms of expenses is less this year than it is last year. And that's including some fairly significant increases in health insurance costs and the various step increases for employees. So if you think about that, that number, you know, that's the thing that really kills us each year is people get raises, which is, you know, that's a fact of life, and health insurance always goes up. And despite all that, we're still looking at a 2.29 decrease in expenditures. That's something this is not a Cadillac budget. And there's a lot of people who, despite the lengthy list of things you've listed, saying this is something we cut out, we change this, we change this, we change this, will still think about it when they see their taxes go up, that this equates to a Cadillac budget. There's the amount of money needed to pay for this. The tax rate is going to go up because we don't have the money in unassigned funds that was not spent on police and so forth to use. We're using that money to pay for the flood expenses. If we did not have the flood expenses and we had this budget, our tax rate would not need to go up at all. It would. What was the number that you worked out? If you had a number, if we did not have to budget for the flood expenses and we were able to use the unassigned fund.
Well, so I guess one way to look at it is if you look at the revenue, and if we were, so knowing that we're about, what did we say, we were down in expenses at about 2.29%, right? So I think where you're going, Jay, is last year we used 433,186 of unassigned funds to offset the budget. So if we change this 62,045 to 433,186 to say, let's attribute that, then you look at what that does to the tax rate. That actually puts us at negative 2.29%.
Right.
But you have to use that almost $500,000, which is the same as we used last year to kind of get there.
But that's still after slashing all the contributions to reserves.
Right, yeah.
So what's the total, out of curiosity, Josh, when you had all the reserves pulled up, showing refunding the reserves, all that stuff? What would be our total amount we're underfunding without having a projection that we can refund them from
Like
FEMA
the
money?
total of all these,
Yeah,
that is a total of $300,000, and I'm not going to guarantee that. I think that's
Well,
comprehensive.
ballpark.
It should be pretty accurate to the budget of $300,000 of what we decided to
And so
do so.
if the
yeah.
FEMA numbers all come back kind of where they're at on here, we'll have approximately $200,000 to make up at some point in the next number of years to get the reserves back on track.
Yeah, I think with that, the 85,000 would probably still fall within the 110. So if you pull that out, you're probably closer to 215, assuming that FEMA goes 100% to Bridge and Culvert Reserve, Special Project Reserve, and Highway Capital Reserve. And then you have these other ones that, and you've got some more years ahead to make that up. That's a good way to look at it.
Okay, so there was an email that Dave Thomas sent, which is a matter of public record, because it's public correspondence, that summed this all up, I thought, very neatly. Do you mind, does Dave mind if we pull that up here? Because I think that,
You may not.
I didn't know if I don't remember if he said that this could be shared.
No, he'd like his feedback shared with the select board.
Okay,
So let
well,
me.
the point, I guess Dave's point, if you can summarize Dave's point, because it was a good point.
Yeah, let me stop sharing really quick so I can navigate and find that email. But I think you're right. It was a good point to bring up. All right, so Dave said that assuming the conservation tax and donation articles pass, the total budget would be approximately 1% less than last year. So I did offer a couple corrections. I think my numbers show that if those pass, we're actually at about 0.33% lower. But the tax rate he got at about 7% higher, and the biggest reason being dropping from the 433 to the $62,000 as far as what we're able to use. And yeah, he's correct. It's mostly about the amount of unassigned funds that we're able to use. And he said he thinks it's going to be really important that whatever amounts are locked in to fully tell the citizens well in advance of the Australian ballot about sort of how we got to where we're at.
Right, and that
How that
point you just
factors in.
made is important because we no longer have the ability at town meeting to answer questions, discuss, do a presentation. People are gonna be walking into a voting booth and, as the phrase goes, pulling the lever.
Mhm.
And so it's really important that we communicate everything you've just gone over. Are there places we might still be able to save money? Possibly. But I think you and Connie and the rest of the staff have done a pretty good job making the best of a pretty rotten situation. The other thing, of course, nobody knows is, will FEMA continue its practice of paying on a particular schedule with a new administration? Some of whom say defund FEMA. No one knows.
Right, we are making an assumption that the 24 reimbursement will move in a similar time frame to the 23 reimbursement, where we started seeing reimbursements in the summer. So we're hopeful that we will start to see them again next summer.
And we're also hopeful that we can, and this is insane to even hope this, but no more floods. Obviously, we're going to continue to get floods, and the odds are that they're going to be worse than they were in prior decades.
Yeah, and I think, this flood has sort of taught us, as we have explored other funding opportunities, that, if we get another big $1 million flood, we'll need to seek some short-term funding, and that'll probably be in the form of a current expense note from a bank, or maybe the bond bank if there's a program available. But that's where we'd have to end up being.
Right. And so 2 comments. First, that's based on the advice that you can't really borrow money until you need to borrow money. So you got to use up your available resources until you get there. I also was thinking about, I think item 3C5 in the packet is probably worth looking at momentarily. This is positions.
Yeah, that one. Mhm.
Maybe blow that up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it compares 20 to proposed 26 or draft 26. And the net is a 10-hour decrease. But you'll note that at least compared to the budgeted time, the police goes down by
Can
something.
you explain what you're looking at? Because I'm sorry, I can't see from over here. So do you mind I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah,
I think you gotta blow it up.
You want me to
Yeah,
just
it's a
sort of
lot
walk-
in here.
so this is a a look at by department, the number of hours in each department in fiscal year 20. So we have administration, planning and zoning, library, police and highway. Total it by each department, and then at the bottom, a total of 818.25 hours for FY20, and that's budgeted hours. So, and then when you look at FY25, projected FY26, the bottom line is 808, and I think where Barb was going, and I'll just, since I'm speaking here for a minute, on the police side, this is assuming that we reduce by one officer, so there's 80 hours, and it does not include hours for a chief because we're contracting with Heinsberg. So you could increase that by 80 to get a more, well,
Apples to apples.
apples to apples, if you want to look at it that way.
Well, where I was really going, if you can show more of that final column. And I'm putting highway aside because there's a history of highway and why we increased that, and it was seen as cost effective, even though it's very modest. But basically, the reduction in police FTEs is offsetting increases in other departments. And so I guess one of the things I'd be interested in asking the chief, I mean, if you go back to 20, at least for budgeted purposes, we had 5 full-time, 1 part-time, and 3 per diem. And in 26, we'd have 3 full-time and 1 part-time.
Mhm.
A fairly significant difference in police staffing.
Mhm.
And, you know, I've always thought about this, what, like Jericho chooses not to pay anything for police. They don't want anything apparently. But I'm interested in taking it department by department, because I think we also need to deal with each department based on its merits. So my question for the chief is with this, and this is really for transparency. If we had all these positions filled, what would that lead for shift coverage? And I think there are misunderstandings among the voters and taxpayers about what we've had in the past for shift coverage. So I think it's worth just sort of setting the stage.
Right, for example.
What do we
people
have?
say, what are we doing at 2 o'clock in the morning? The answer is nothing. We don't patrol then.
So I don't know, Chief Cambridge, is there anything you'd want to say about what this would mean in terms of shift coverage if we were fully staffed at this number?
I think a big issue is also going to be what is happening with Heinsberg, because I'm able to do what I'm able to do with the amount of officers that I have right now, which is, I mean, we're barely getting by as far as coverage goes, and things are getting worse. Our call volume is we're looking at about 1,000 calls more in Heinsberg alone than we traditionally had 5 years ago. So ideally, I'd like to be able to keep doing what we're doing, which is 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. However, as the numbers go lower as far as officers, especially if I start to lose people in Heinsberg, covering is going to suffer. And then also keep in mind that it's not just the coverage. I mean, it's easy to say, okay, there's a stolen car. Anybody that has had their car stolen sort of understands how much work that we've put into it that they see, never mind warrants that have to be typed or you know, taking the time to go through each piece of evidence that you find in the car and meeting with you. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So shrinking any more than we are is going to be extremely difficult.
Patty, go ahead. Patty, you're muted.
There we go. That's an interesting comment that Heinsberg is thinking of doing some reduction in police officers, and you know, what will that mean in terms of the coverage that we have? I'm heartened to hear that you've got a couple of people on the line to hire for Richmond. I wanted to ask a question, and then I have a follow-up. It all went very fast for me. Do we we've always had an administrative assistant for the police department. Is that included in this budget for next year as well?
It is. The initial iteration, we asked to increase that from 20 hours to 40 hours to be a full-time administrative assistant. In the budget, with the budget cuts, we've reduced that back to 20 hours, but yeah, I think an administrative assistant of at least 20 hours is critical for policing.
Share that with Heinsberg.
Okay.
I would like to
I've
recommend
had some conversations.
as a follow-up. Can I follow up on that, guys?
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to recommend that we budget the full-time administrative assistant. The Heinsberg Police Department, for the most part, and the chief who serves both towns are doing 2 towns now. So I'm guessing that when Lisa Miller asked at the public safety forum 2 years ago, what can we do to support you? The chief had answered administrative assistant. I don't think he has had one for these 2 years. And the police officers and the chief are covering now 2 towns, and he's managing 2 schedules. He's managing trainings, budgets, billing, equipment, buildings, and goodness knows what else for 2 towns. I think that's probably why he would want to have. I'll let him speak to that. I'm here to just represent Richmond Racial Equity, who has been doing an awful lot of work around helping the public understand public safety in Richmond. We've run a few forums, and we've done a bunch of research about public transparency through the websites of the different towns. What can be reported by the police department, as well as the Community Justice Center, and as well as Howard Mental Health. And tonight's meeting, people were talking about all of the different issues that are going on with crime and drugs and so forth. And there needs to be a place where people can go. And the chief has been in both towns, and the officers are doing media releases on Front Porch Forum. It would be terrific if we had someone who was able to put those media releases on our town website in the public safety area. It'd be nice if someone was putting data on officer training, traffic stops, race data, WCJC data, activities, collaboration, data with Howard Mental Health, community outreach. There's a number of things that would be extremely helpful if we had an updated website with this information. We've been doing a tremendous amount of research about what is possible in our committee. And you can hear from the chief in that last statement, we're writing warrants and we're doing this. And this is the police officers as well as the chief. And they're trying to, and try to run 2 departments. I think it's, we have to fund a full-time administrative assistant in order to help them have their, do their jobs well as keep the community informed. We can't have meeting after meeting like this, and talk about different cars that got stolen. If you go to, for instance, the Burlington website, those media releases are on there, and they not only tell incidents each day, but they also, that are like big incidents. Of course, they're not going to write out traffic tickets, but they tell who the person was, who was involved, and has this person been arrested before, and when, and how many times, and so forth. So all the information that people were kind of looking for tonight, as well as statements from their chief talking about safety and so forth. All of that stuff would be really, really important, in addition to, the kinds of administrative help that our police department needs. So it seems to me that we're saving a bunch of money by contracting with Heinsberg, and we should be putting some of that money back into the police department and not just using, it's just we feel very strongly that you should be putting in a full-time administrative assistant. So I guess that's all I would just like to say.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Connie?
So on a couple of the points, we're not saving a bunch of money. We just showed that we only saved about 30,000 in vacancy savings, and that was for the whole department. Second, even when we had a full staff, full officers, full chief, the administrative position was 20 hours, and Diane still struggled. Like there really wasn't 20 hours worth of work. The last couple of years with fewer staff, she was running about 12 hours a week. And as far as getting the information out there, I think it's great. I love to see it, but you know what we found when we did put a lot of information out there? We still had people on Front Porch Forum saying what's going on or not knowing that people didn't.
I have a
Some
question
people were
for-
interested, but a lot
Question
of
for
them
Anthony
weren't.
about that. Anthony, is there stuff that an admin can do and can't do? Where is that line?
Yeah.
Of what they can legally do and what's easy to integrate and where it's helpful for you to offload stuff?
The list goes on and it's extensive. Processing tickets, doing crash reports, paying bills, helping with budgetary issues, stuff as far as NIBRS, NCIC. I mean, they have access to the police database. They're trained sort of like a dispatcher would be trained. And without that, it falls back on me and it falls on my officers. You know, one of the things that's nice when you have an admin is it's when I did have an admin in Heinsberg, they did a lot. We had an admin that could process tickets and it was nice for the officer to be able to say, okay, can you help me put together a case packet, or this needs to be emailed to the state's attorney. It really is an extensive amount, and it all falls back on my sergeant, one of my officers who's been great helping with crash reports, and also me. I'm sitting 1 minute at my desk trying to run stats, and then the next minute, like last week, I literally at my desk, and the next minute I'm outside wrestling a guy with a baseball bat. You know,
Do we have an idea of how much does it cost an officer per hour versus an admin? 50, what's like the ratio?
Give me a minute.
So we're like,
So you're working on that.
theoretically, we're hiring an admin. Oh, sorry,
Gotta
bud.
raise your hand.
Go ahead.
My first question is, when you had the admin assistant in Heinsberg, was it part-time or full-time?
it was part-time, 25 hours per week. However, we had a 40-hour volunteer that we had since I think 2003, and he left I think in 21, and so we were struggling with the 25 hours because and the volunteer was able to, he was a former IBM executive, he was able to run stats and give great reports on just about anything I asked for. So I was struggling with 25 hours at that point, and now we're down to zero for both towns essentially.
And so my second question is, since it's Christmas time, nobody gets a pony, but if you had a choice between an officer and a full-time admin assistant, which would be a higher priority?
I would have to say, I guess not to lose an officer, because I can spread out, you know, it's unfortunate to have to, but I can spread out admin work. You know, I can't put an admin out on the street or on the road. So if I had to pick, it's not something I want to pick, but that would be the way it would go.
Yeah,
What do you want to go to?
good question, Brad.
One option that we did look at was, rather than going from 4 officers to 3, if we wanted the budget at 3.5, which would give us some money to go towards that 4th officer, knowing that hiring has been a bit challenging and slow, we could add an additional about $54,000 into this budget. And that would allow us to not fully eliminate the fourth position, just sort of partially fund it. And if we hire it earlier, at least we have money there for a fourth officer.
Not suggesting a part-time officer, just budgeting for
Budgeting
a
for when we
full-time
get
officer
hired,
for half a year.
potentially.
Assuming they wouldn't be hired
The-
till whenever.
Just being realistic that we haven't had a full department for
Makes
a
sense.
couple of years, even though we've had some interviews, there's not a huge swell of applicants, and as we go through the due diligence process with each one of them, some of them do unfortunately not make it. So.
Jay?
Okay, so I just wanted to, Connie made a good point about Diane only really was working 13 hours a week toward the end. The fact that our previous chief did not necessarily give an admin 25 to 30 hours worth a week didn't mean that there wasn't stuff that could be done. We often had to put up with delays on things. So I think that just because we weren't fully utilizing an admin doesn't mean that that's, as they say, past performance does not guarantee future. I think that there is close to at least 30 hours of work that we could make
Right.
use of if we had that position.
Karen?
Can I ask budget questions? Is that okay, or does it just have to be police related? Okay, first question for you is, this FY 26 budget, what is the deadline drop, the date that you have to be completing this?
I think it's like the third week in January, we have to have a number to put on the ballot. So we've got, I would say about 2 weeks into January, by January 15th, I think we really need to be very buttoned up on this. It might be the 20th if I asked Linda the exact date, but
Yeah.
if we shoot for the 15th, yeah, we've got about 4 or 5 weeks ahead of us of where we could really do anything with it.
Well, plus Linda needs it for the annual report.
Well, that's what I'm basing that on. I remember one year we literally gave it to her the day it was due. We had a meeting on Monday night, and that Tuesday morning I gave her the number. It was late January.
Thank you. I've got a couple other questions. That helps me understand where you're at in this process, so thank you for that. Back to Jay's comment about the Cadillac budget. I think your original budget was a Cadillac, so I want to give you credit for getting rid of the Cadillac and bringing it down and revisiting some of the areas that you can revisit. So I want to compliment you on that. I just want to make sure I understand, Jay, Josh, do you mind bringing up the first page of your budget where you're showing that minus $43,000 in the blue? So everywhere that you've put these deductions that you're taking out, it really means that that's going to go to that top line, administrative line that's at 431,000 is where you're going to actually take these funds out of.
Yeah, it would actually, just to be fully transparent, it would be spread a bit between salary and benefits.
Okay, so it's the sum total of what's going to hit those GL account numbers that I just wanted to make sure. I want to make sure I'm understanding your presentation.
So if we were gonna finalize this tonight and come back, this 42 would go away, or 43, but you'd have a sum total of $43,000 reduction, like around these numbers here.
Perfect. Now, I do have some specific questions for the budget itself, so I can make sure I can understand some of the line items and what you've got going on with it. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask those now. I think, like I said, you guys have made such strides with this whole thing that now I just want to look at a couple of the line items to understand what goes into them, because I assume if I'm asking the questions, others might as well.
Can I have you pause on those specific questions? We'll call on Lisa, and I just want to.
One
Go
overall
back to-
general question before we get to any specifics, then my last overall one is the buyouts, the FEMA buyouts that are going to occur. That's going to impact your grand list, which impacts your revenues for FY 26, because those buyouts will probably occur in FY 25, knowing based on having participated in multiple buyouts as a person that was administrating that. That is, if we're talking about 10, let's just say 10 properties at a value of 400,000 a home, which is on a low side or a high side, depending on the home. So let's say an average of 400,000, you're talking about an impact to your grand list of $4 million. That's $4 million less that you could have revenue based on. Has there been any adjustment or calculation in your revenues for this budget,
On the grand list side of it? No,
on the revenue side of it?
so, well, it's all based off of the grand list. So right now,
Correct.
right, so this number here highlighted in yellow, we have not updated with any sort of a projection for where we're gonna be at this time next year. We basically took where we were on July 15th to 24, added that in here. You bring up a good point about the buyouts. Typically, we'll go to the assessor. That number will go up based on projections of additions, but it very well could go down this year based on buyouts that could come to realization. I think right now we've got 2, maybe 3 that are approved and a few more that are in the application process. So those 3, I think you're right, those likely could be realized by the end of FY 25. The other ones, they may not finalize until 27.
I'm at FY 26.
Yeah, I know, sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
you're,
So
in 25.
So, no, so what I meant was the 3 that are pretty much finalized right now, that have applications that are approved, I think those could be bought out and off the grand list.
Before April 1st?
Actually, for April 1st, probably not.
No, so that's why it's gonna impact 26, is what I'm telling you.
Right,
Because
so
the
but this
April
is,
1st deadline is
so-
your grand list
right, so then
for
it would,
FY 26.
so it would impact FY 27 budget. Okay, you were saying 26. So.
Yeah, I'm like trying to figure out which one you're saying.
Yeah, no, and I was trying to follow you. So I think for this budget, the grand list probably would not go down because because it's not gonna happen in the next 4
Okay.
months.
Okay,
I think that will be an FY 27.
For
those 3.
Yes.
perfect.
And
I
then the
just-
other ones, the other ones might be by 27 as well. They might all hit by
Okay.
April 1st of 26, which would make them an
Affecting
FY
27.
27.
So there's
problem.
no need for an FY 26
Thank you.
adjustment.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that, because that's gonna be a question people ask once the buyouts
Yeah.
start to happen is, where is this gonna impact anybody? It has no impact for the FY 26
It should not.
budget.
I don't think it should.
Perfect,
based on
thank
this
you. Now delete,
application.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Lisa, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Am I on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Back when Chief was talking about admins and volunteers, I find that kind of intriguing. Anthony, you found volunteers to do regular work? I mean, to show up regularly and do the work. How did that work out?
It was before my time. He was hired.
Okay.
Chris Morrell had hired him. He started as chief in the early 90s.
Mm,
His name was Doug Olofsson. He worked for IBM and he really was a great benefit to the department. And but yeah, I mean he was working 40 plus hours, all administrative work, and which really helped us. It helped supplement some of the work that we probably would have needed a 40-hour-a-week admin at that point.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it's a lot to expect someone to volunteer for 40 hours a week or even just 40 hours of a week. But, if that were to happen, the top complainers about budget, if they put in a few hours at the town offices typing or making calls, they'd help themselves and they'd help everyone. So I don't know how we could count on that, how we could actually budget for that to happen when it's sort of like a phantom, but it's an intriguing idea anyway. So thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
those things are sort of an anomaly. It's hard to get people into the police field in general. So
I have a question, comment. Is Keith or
Thank you. Sure, so.
it has to do with, our grand list will be affected by buyouts. But on the other hand, it could be affected by new construction.
Correct.
And I do not remember what the status is of the new supermarket to be built around the corner. I don't, at some point, I mean, last I heard, Dan Noyes was still planning. And at some point, I mean, would that not be a fairly sizable increase to the grand list? So I'm just saying, will it be this year? No.
No.
But in the next few years, it hypothetically could more than make up for the losses we've had from buyouts.
Yeah, I don't. maybe
That's
Keith has
tentatively
more
on
of an
hold.
update.
I've
I'm sorry,
heard. And that's tentative,
Connie,
it's
can you just slide your? laptop
indefinitely on
back?
hold.
indefinitely
Yeah.
on hold.
That-
I
that's what
don't,
understood.
it's not
Yeah.
like based on any personal inside info, it's just kind of
Okay.
what I've heard.
TBD.
Jay, your
Yeah.
comment is there, 'cause I just wanted to make sure it wasn't impacting the budget that you were.
Oh, no,
working on.
totally. But, I am hoping for some, modest in the grand list, one way or another.
There are, yeah, I mean, construction.
Patty, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to have some clarity about what this meeting is for. So, is this meeting, you're listening to Josh, you're listening to the members of the community, and then it sounds as though you might be, the budget clearly has changed since the last time you met because of this report. So Josh must have gotten feedback from you and so forth. So I'm just wondering where you stand on this, the select board stands on this administrative assistant position. I heard Jay say maybe it could be 30 hours. Was that a proposal? Does the select board have to just talk about that and make some sort of thoughts on that, and then potentially direct Josh to put that back in? Or how does this work? How does the budget work in terms of making changes along this process, or is it done?
No, it's not done. That's the point of the meeting. This is an information exchange session, and we take information we gather during this meeting and tweak the budget accordingly. So yeah, the administrative assistant position is still in play.
David, I'm just gonna guess we're not gonna be done tonight.
God, no.
What do people think about a 30-hour position? Do you think
I
there's
have
enough value? Go ahead.
I
Oh,
have
yeah.
his number, 5172 per hour with benefits for an officer at the bottom of the grid with a 2-person healthcare plan. And for a 20-hour admin position, it is $26.08 per hour.
What would that admin go to if it was full-time? Including benefits, just so it's apples to apples.
Double the 20 hours you got.
No,
Minimum.
it's
But
more
add
because
health
you gotta
insurance.
factor in benefits.
And boomers and.
So an admin person at 40 hours goes up to $39.78 per hour. So that would trigger at 24 hours, you trigger Beamers, at 30 hours, you trigger health insurance.
Right.
Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know if there was any consideration given to giving some sort of bonus or raise or something to folks on the road crew in light of all the work that they've done last year and this year as a result of the floods. It was something I sent an email to Josh about that I think he might have passed on to the rest of you.
Yes. Excellent question. It is still in play. Bart?
Okay.
David, I'll say, we also had a conversation about this, including, but not limited to, the highway department associated with flood-related activities. What, a month ago? 6 weeks ago?
A couple months ago, I think it was a little closer to the flood
Yeah.
considered.
So we did start a conversation about it many weeks ago, for what that's worth.
Anthony, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to just sort of put it out there that I know every year it's a struggle for money and resources and what money goes to where. But I've been policing in this area for about 12 years now, and I kind of just I feel like I have to say it now is not the time. Any other year, possibly, we're going to need, I don't think it's going to get better. I think that, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I think that Richmond and Heinsberg were sort of the last of the towns to feel the downward spiral that the state is taking. And it's these problems are just in my opinion going to get worse, and we really need to position ourselves on solid groundwork to handle it when it happens, or as it gets progressively worse, if that happens. And I hope it doesn't. But feel like I have to say going backward is this is not a good time for that. So
Thanks, Chief. Kara?
I agree with him going backwards because we're at 0 now, so going up to 20 is a benefit as far as I'm concerned. Because we're at 0 right now, we have no administrative staff. We have no administrative staff for FY25 at all that I'm aware of. So being at least a minimum of, I like the 20 hours. Let's prove that we can use them a full 20. Let's make sure that we have what they can be doing. Like Adam's saying, let's make sure we have a true job description of the range, if they can take care of tickets, if they can help with warrants, if they can do any of that kind of work. But prove it with 20 hours to start with, and prove that you have those 3 officers that needs that support. So I'm, you know me, I've been pushing you all hard on the budget. Right now, if you're gonna say 3 officers for the 20-hour a week, I'm not gonna push back on that. But if you're gonna push for 40 hours a week for an admin person, when we don't even know if we're gonna have 3 officers, then I might give you a little pushback on that. I'm just giving you a heads up. But my question on the highway bonuses, because I think we've heard that about from Heinsberg too. Can that be a FEMA reimbursable thing if we have it built into our system? That if they've had to work for FEMA events, that it triggers this, so it's part of the payroll that can get reimbursed?
My thought is probably not, because they tie each hour directly back to an hour worked doing a job. So they look at their total compensation and say, how much time did you spend on that road project? They're not gonna say, and then plus a bonus.
I'd like to look at, have you guys look into how you can build that, so it might work for you as a beneficial piece. Which goes to your 110,000 that you have that's remaining on your projections for your FY25 going into FY26 unassigned funds in current year on the FEMA page, that you've got the money being paid back to the highway department. That 110,000 that you all are seeing as potentially putting funds into the reserves, you technically aren't taking funds out of the reserves, you're just not funding them in this budget. So you can't use, using unassigned funds and sliding them into reserves is going to cause you a problem if it's not that you've taken the money from the reserves. And I'd like to finish with that line of thought, if that's okay. So if you look at your unassigned funds on the one where you've got the 62,000 on it, you're predicting, your projections are for FY25. I really think when you have flood events, that your flood events expenses actually happened in FY24. So your FY24 unassigned should have been impacted. I'm just walking through this out loud. Let me finish my thought process, if you don't mind. You might not have had all of the invoices by June 30th, but you had some of them. Correct? When did the flooding event happened in FY25? In July?
Yeah, can I want to let you finish, but I want to make sure that I know where you're going. Can I just maybe
Ask a question?
offer
Sure.
one point of clarity or question? So this chart, I think it's helpful when looking at it. We've got FY24. We had $340,123 in just the highway restricted funds at the end of FY24.
Sure.
So that's June 30th, before the second flood.
Okay, so the second flood happened in 25.
Second flood happened in
Thank you.
25.
That's the clarity. I
So,
need.
so this number does include some of the paybacks that we got from the 23 flood. Some of those paybacks were able to book to 24.
24.
Yes, but the ones that it does not include is these here for 23 flood. So this, deferred expenses, so it does not include this roughly 505,000, which will be coming in FY25. And then we reserved $374,000 because even though we're getting paid back by FEMA on these 2 projects, it's Dugway Road and Old Jericho Road, we have yet to do those projects. So we have to make sure we have money to accomplish those projects.
Got it. So in this whole calculation of what you've got going on, my question to you is, where's your 110? On
Right.
this chart,
By 110.
the 110 that you're calculating after you've got
Yeah.
the remaining FEMA funds
This 110
of
here.
110. Yeah, where is that on that chart right above it?
So
Right
that,
before it.
so the way I got to the 110 is, it's not on that. It's saying if we get reimbursed at 75% of all the highway expenses. So we're taking the total highway expenses. So this 1.7 million
Yes,
is what we spent hard costs on contractors and materials for the flood that happened in 2024.
correct. And right underneath that is the funds that you've pulled out of reserves. Correct? Those two blue lines
Right.
are funds that you've put into the unassigned out of reserves,
Well,
and you plan on paying them back.
so that we did do that essentially to free up.
No,
money.
we are actually, those two blue lines are actually, in order to trigger unassigned funds,
Right, so
we
we're
have
gonna
to
use
actually-
those.
we're not just using the cash from those reserves, we are actually expensing those reserves.
Right.
So that does have to be replaced.
Right,
Correct.
so these are actually, yes, these would be drawn down to zero.
Right.
So the way I'm getting to this, and hopefully, Carol, I'm following where you're at is, I'm saying of this $1.7 million,
Mhm.
we will get 75% of that back, hopefully by August or so of next year. So that's 1.3 million in cash that we'll get back.
Correct. And when you look down below, you're going to reimburse your bridge and culvert fund and your special
Right.
projects funds by $1.2 million.
Which is the same, I hope it's the same as these two here.
Right.
So it's reimbursing those fully to get them back to where they,
Right,
where
but
they started
I want you,
today.
I want to understand something right now. The pluses and the minuses in this column here.
Mhm.
The plus means the money's coming into the unassigned, and the minus means the money's going out of.
Right.
Right now, you've only added in the bridge and culvert in FY 25 that you say you're gonna get paid back in FY 25. You haven't subtracted it
Well-
back out when you put it back in the reserve.
No,
No, because
No.
well, I don't expect to get paid back on that until FY 26.
Okay, so then it should be in the FY 26 column is my point.
So, so this is just showing what our projected balance is at the end of 25.
Right.
So what I'm saying is we spent 1.7 million. If we use 473 from bridge and culvert and 795 from special projects, that then helps us at our end of year balance get up to $22,000 at the end of FY 25. I'm not making the
You're not
26.
Any adjustments for FY
I'm not
27?
making, it's hard enough to get a prediction for 25. So what I'm doing is I'm putting it and saying, if we use that, then we're at a positive 22,000 in highway funds. And then, so what I'm trying to do with this chart is show if we get 75% back, let's call it July, August, September sometime. So that'll
Is it
be,
in 26?
that'll be in FY 26. Then we'll get 1.3 back. And then at that point, when we're sitting around this table a year from now, we'll say, well, of that 1.3, 473 needs to go to bridge and culvert, 795 needs to go to special projects. So let's budget for that to go into those reserve funds, maybe through the budgeting process for FY 27, but we need to kind of earmark that to slide back in.
Beautiful.
Does that?
That, I just
Get
wanted
you
you to
there?
walk through that,
Okay,
100%.
good,
That's
sure.
what I had those questions. I wanted you to walk through it. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people did too.
Sure.
Connie?
so I do have a couple of suggestions, don't cut my head off.
We don't have the money for that.
One is, very good. We won't be able to afford the insurance. One thing we could consider, I know we're trying to get away from loans for our capital plan, but one thing we could consider is doing a bond for the Southview Bridge when we have a better time of when we're gonna do it and a better amount. Right now, we're just plunking $1 million there. We don't know exactly when. We don't know what the engineers will come in and we know nothing. We could consider that and not replenish that fund when the unassigned funds come in. The other thing that
Right,
is,
you just, I just want to make sure. So that would, right now, it's budgeted to come out of bridge and culvert. It's $1 million project that's estimated for what, like fiscal year
31.
31.
Oh, okay.
So you're saying rather than reimburse it fully,
Stop contributing
stop contributing and maybe consider a loan.
and
it's 5
consider
years
doing
out.
a loan when we get there. That way, because otherwise we're going to be in the same boat next year with unassigned funds because all our FEMA money's going to go back to make up for what we didn't put in reserves and what we borrowed from reserves. Another thing, it's not a lot of money. And this isn't a popular topic. Conservation Commission is the only reserve that I am aware of that is not part of our capital plan, and we contribute to it every year. And with the grand list going up, that's over $80,000 a year now. I want people to be really aware that what we have in front of us right now has a 7.12% increase. That does not include, which will amount to probably about 80,000 of conservation funds and any other donations we do. So even if we do the 7.12, we're probably going to be looking between 8 and 9% once we add those on top.
If
Can
the
we go
voters vote in-
lower than the norm?
Yeah,
Like,
in favor.
could we
the
go
total or the-
lower than the normal we do for conservation? Do we have the authority
yes.
to not do the full amount, but do a lesser
Well, no, it's a separate.
Right.
amount?
So I
So the
think,
conservation fund doesn't affect this budget because it's a separate item we vote on for 1 penny, right?
Well,
No, that's
You're
BS.
still
So
gonna
if
keep-
everyone
And it-
votes it down, it doesn't go in like that. No, we're not gonna pull that out because then we're gonna pull it out, say, hey, we lowered your budget. If you
But we
vote
really
no in
did.
this
So
thing,
it's the budget
Connie,
or
that's
the-
not, no,
But
no.
it goes on later.
What?
It's
It goes
not,
on-
it's not in
It's not
now.
in this.
I view this as, it's not in this budget. It's
Yeah.
actually pulled out. I view this, I view conservation as something, if the voters want it, the voters can ask for it.
No, they can, but I'm just saying, it does impact the budget because it's getting paid from taxes.
well,
It impacts the. Yeah, but it
If you
doesn't
look
affect,
at
it doesn't affect this tax rate.
Side,
We're talking about this tax rate. It does not affect this tax rate, And if it does, your math, something's going on in your math that does not make
because
sense.
if I go over right now and on the expense side,
So-
I plug that we're putting
so
$80,000 of
I
tax
think
money into the budget,
it
it
does-
increases it.
but it doesn't affect the tax rate that we finalized to go to the voters with. We go to the voters with, here's the budget as presented, it's 7.12% increase. Would you also like to tax yourselves more for the conservation reserve fund? In which case, then yes.
Right.
And then they add that to the budget, and that's fine.
That's why I'm saying it's not part of the budget, but when that tax bill comes out, it most certainly is part
Well,
of your
it's
tax.
part of the
bill.
tax bill, but then they know.
But they have the ability
passed
to,
it.
so all we would be doing is,
Understand that.
well, I think it's worded pretty clearly on there. I think all this stuff. we're doing-
I think there's a lot of people that don't
Karen?
understand that when they
Okay,
go to the
so I'd
ballot.
like to talk about a couple of the line items that I want to just make sure that they're not actual charitable contributions, that we're actually getting a service for them, or if they should be moved to the charitable contribution section. So I'm looking specifically underneath the town administration, under the community well-being, that's $5,000. I thought that was a charitable contribution, that community well-being, and it goes to a nonprofit.
So that, let me find, I think, follow along. Community well-being, right, so that is money that the board put in, I guess, 2 or maybe 3 years ago. It's not specific to a specific request. It was the idea of, can we have some money if there's community well-being ideas? It has ended up being, I think, the same organization that's
Yes.
requested that money the last number of years.
Yes.
But anybody could come to us with an idea tomorrow and say, we want to do this. But that's how it works. I'm not positive or negative.
I would like to recommend that that line item be removed from the town administration budget and it be put as a charitable contribution, and that nonprofit that's been getting it for the past couple of years can be on the list of charitable contributions, because they've now created a nonprofit. So I think it's important that we're not showing some kind of, I mean, I support it, don't get me wrong, but it needs to be categorized like the other nonprofits.
Art?
So I guess there's a tactical question here, and there's an appeal to this because it's not a core part of something we have to do when I think about these positions and things we have to do. And I think it would make sense if other people agree. I'm still on the fence. Is it community well-being or is it a specific
Is it all
organization?
together now?
Yeah,
It's offset by the opioid settlement money on the revenue side. So we're not paying taxes for it.
Missed that, what was it offset by? I'm sorry.
The opioid settlement.
We have over
Funding that.
$13,000 in an opioid settlement. We're using that 5,000 to offset the $5,000 expense line.
But that won't last, that's 13, after 3
But
years.
for this
it's
year, if we remove it, I think our point is if we removed it from the budget, it would have no effect. 'Cause we would remove this $5,000 as well. So it would not actually lower the tax rate as
I
proposed.
still just think it needs to go in the right categories.
It might be able, yeah, I mean, that's
guess
a fair question.
Philosophically, if we want to keep it open to anyone to apply for it, we would keep it here. If we do think we're truly going to only give it to all together now, then we should put it in we should move it over. So we're just being clear about it. I mean, I think keeping it in this category and then not continuing to promote
I think
it
it's the
for
third- Yeah.
outside for other organizations to apply for that money is a little, maybe not disingenuous, but it's at least lazy in the best case scenario.
I think that's a very good point.
So if we are confident in the work altogether now does, and we think it's worth $5,000, we want to continue funding that. Specifically, we should make that switch and just be clear about that. That would be, I mean, I think it doesn't affect the budget differently because we would still fund it the same
Right.
for the next 1.6 years until we run out of $13,000, but
To put it in as a voted on option by the voters.
But there was a couple other ones that I wanted to.
I
confirm
guess.
Too. They are under the
Yeah, I mean,
recreation trails. You have two different Lake Iroquois. You have Richmond Farmers Market and you have Camel's Hump Little League Field. So my question on those are any of those charitable and should go underneath the charitable category? Or do we have contracts or receive a specific service for them? I think the things that you keep in your budget are things that we get a specific service for.
the Lake
And anything
Iroquois
that somebody has
Association,
to apply for a grant from us goes into the charitable section.
Lake Iroquois is, pardon?
I would just say, when we went through this in great detail in the Hogwarts Sorting Hat last year, we distinguish between what many towns do for recreational funding, and this is really common for Little League. Recreational funding and budget includes frequently external sort of uses, unlike some of the other things. So for better or worse, I'm describing what we did, whether we change it now or agree with it now or not. But that's why some things stayed in here under an allowable expense and under recreation. And some of this, a reminder, was predicated on a court case that was looking for voter approval
Right,
of
Middletown Springs.
charitable contributions. So literally, I'm contributing to something out there. Separate from that, if you looked at a bunch of other towns, you would see budgets that are in the recreational budget that are for separate organizations or entities, and that was seen as allowable, unlike some of the other charitable stuff. It's an imperfect answer, but that was the sorting.
The Camel's Hump Little League Field is not actual Little League for our rec programs. It says field. So by that description, I'm just trying to understand if it's the school, that's different than your rec field.
Right, so I think that request was centered mostly around like recover from flooding last year. So it was, that money would go back into the fields. The Little League wasn't gonna buy like baseball bats with it. It would be something that the whole community could enjoy because it'd be money back into the fields.
But it says Camel's Hump. That's
That seems a little bit, sorry, it's, yeah. It's Camel's Hump Little League is the name of the Little League now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so that's why,
It's
that's
not
my
the school.
question
It's
was,
not the school. It would be for like volunteers, Green Browns Court.
that answers
that's
that
for those
question.
kids.
You can remove that. But, I mean, but that's a pretty, the description of that is,
Yeah, it's not very.
it's not a very good description. If anything, I think you should change it, because if it's for Little League, then just put Little League Fields.
Right, yeah, that's true.
You're not writing the check to Camel's Hump, you're writing the check to whoever's doing the field work. Correct?
Well, I think the way it was set up, it was a request from the Camel's Hump Little League.
So
with
you
the
write a
idea
check to
that-
them?
Right, with the idea that that money would go back into the fields. Right, well, that's why I think it's a field.
Can we just put Little League Fields?
I mean, if it's gonna be, avoid confusion, we could do that.
Just call it Little League Field. Is that viable?
I think
And,
that's,
and there were other examples here, like, the Richmond Community Band, which is nominal, but it's not a nonprofit. It was seen as a recreational activity, for better or worse. Just describing how it's sorted.
Right, and I think the community band, like part of the guidance we got, Bard, as I recall, was if that organization is providing something of value directly to the town, and the idea was the band provides free concerts to the town, so that was part of where we didn't have to vote on it separately, but put it in.
But if we're cutting the check to Camel's Hump Little League, it's actually field that should come off the end of it.
Right.
Not Camel's Hump Little League.
Maybe put a
Because we're not giving the money to a field.
That's true
We're
too.
giving the
but
money
it's a line item.
to
You
an
don't- you name-
organization.
You don't name all the organizations in every line item that you're paying for. It's a line item for.
No, we do.
Well, so we do, I mean, that's where
Would field
you get
brackets.
Lake Iroquois
Yeah.
Association, Lake Iroquois District, Richmond Community Band, Richmond Farmers Market, those are the names of the organizations.
You could put field in brackets.
No, the brackets cost extra money.
June, go ahead.
June Heston, I'm gonna speak up so the mic can catch you. I want to go back to the conversation where we're talking about taking money out of the admin side for all together now and moving it under charitable. Is that something you're considering doing?
I'm not in favor of it. I think it should stay where it is, but I think Adam had a good point. If we truly are meaning it to be for community wellness, and if an organization came along and said, well, we have an idea and we were willing to send money their way, then it makes sense where it is. But if we're really, I'm just repeating what he said.
Yeah, yeah.
If we're really locking in that it will stop being altogether now, then I think it should be under the charitable appropriations. But I think it should stay where it is because it is possible that some other use might come up.
I do want to say that if you make the decision to move it, you have to sort of give them some slack on the application process.
Yeah.
Because they would not have known this.
Yeah.
During the budgeting process before. So I just want to put that out there.
It's a very good
But I do want to point to that is if we do move it, how does that affect the ability to use opioid funding to offset something that's
Also a good
voted
point.
on?
That is also a good point.
Because I want to make sure that, I like that we're using opioid money for it, because we haven't had a really good use of the opioid funds other than this, which is part preventative work, which helps reduce opioid use.
One lot more last year, the opioid funding.
You got about, it might be one or two more years.
Like a year and a half after this year.
Yeah. That's
So then maybe we revisit it then. I'll withdraw my request and revisit it when you don't have those funds anymore. That's
Yeah.
okay with the board.
I think at that point, it would make sense too, if we're not potentially constrained by it being opiate money and we want it,
Yeah.
opioid settlement money, we want to continue to fund altogether now, then we would switch it over.
Right.
Put it to the voters and
And it would affect the budget.
Thank you. I did not.
at least we should have a plan. So hopefully the whole board doesn't turn over by then.
Yeah. Okay, where were we?
I think I have more. Where you going?
I do if we're allowed to talk about it.
Question.
No,
You did that.
we'll address it.
In your planning and zoning line, and I don't know if you're gonna move any of those other ones that Richmond Farmers Market, anything like that, that could be considered charitable or not, that's your call. Internship underneath planning and zoning. We've had $2,000 in the budget for multiple years. We don't have an intern right now. We didn't have one in 2024, but we're predicting one in 2026. I don't mean to penny pinch, but I don't think it's necessary.
I think,
Keith has
I
a
think Keith
plan.
has an actual plan for
Yeah.
it this year. He's got, did he put his hand up? But I know. Because Carol, I'm right there with you. We haven't done anything with it for a while. But this year, I think, and Keith, I think you're on the call, you can speak to it, but I think it might be related to the rewrite of the town plan where you need some extra help.
That is correct. The potential for that is there.
Okay, and we have underneath planning and zoning, we have 5,000 for contract service planning, 5,000 for transportation planning, 2,000 for engineering, 10,000 for legal reserves. Do we have plans to spend all of that in FY 26?
Well, I hope we don't go through all our whole legal reserve. That would be kind of a downer, to be honest with you. But the transportation planning, that is if we get the transportation committee up and running again, I think that would be something beneficial, to be honest with you. What else did we have here? Did she say engineering? Engineering is for the DRB for review. So that's pretty typical. What else? Am I missing anything else?
Contract services, planning and zoning, I think was the only one you didn't speak to.
Yeah, and I know I have notes on all those also.
Well, contract services, we only spent 224, so maybe there's some room in that one. We haven't used. There might be potential to reduce that a couple $1,000s.
Our note
Yeah.
says CCRPC other than transportation planning such as zoning amendment review.
Okay.
Right, and town plan. Yep.
Zoning amendment review is by the lawyer, isn't it? And isn't that under legal?
It can be by lawyer, but it could also be through a CCRCP. And if for some reason we have gone through all of our funds that we funneled to them, we do have to pay them a certain hourly wage. Now, I would say that it's 5,000. Yeah, I don't know if we need 5,000, to be honest with you. I mean, we certainly could most likely cut that in half, to be honest with you, especially based on the past.
Well, actually, we went over 5,000 in 24.
In 24,
No,
no.
we were at 224. Actual, right here.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we budgeted 20, but our actual was over 5,000.
No, you're on the wrong line. We're on contract services.
Okay.
Right.
That one, yeah.
Transportation planning, a lot of those tie back to UPWP projects, things like that with CRPC. But yeah, this one, we were well under in 24.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no issue if you want to reduce that whatsoever.
Okay.
Reduce it to 25.
That's what he said, 2,500, half it.
I'll keep a running total if we want to,
2,500?
want to go on the fly with some of these and just sort of see where we get to. If we,
$2,752.
I'll just keep.
On the library department, the electric vehicle charging station is going from $1,000 to $5,000. I just want to understand why it goes that.
That's just based on usage. So the library's got the library was the only place that they could put when they installed the charging station. We were the only ones that had the capacity. Right.
Goes through their
and
meter.
so we get billed for what the library uses plus the charging station.
Gotcha.
And then it comes back out because of what people have actually paid to charge their cars.
And you guys have to feed the hamsters that power that.
There's an offset on the revenue
So
side.
there's an offset on the revenue side.
Yeah, because we're getting paid back by the user. So
To confirm that.
nope, that's helpful.
But we were putting in another one. I don't know. Just a second. No.
Does it say that, the offset?
I was just looking for where there's an offset in here, right, Connie?
Yep, towards the,
To the bottom.
yeah, it'd be a 10,635.
And
Blah, 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 blah. Line 35.
Oh, line 35. So right here, library electric vehicle charging station. But that's the offset of 30.
We change it.
That number doesn't match.
Okay, so
Offset number
that be-
does not
that
match.
should be 5,000 then, right? Is that what we have on the other side?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
well
That
then,
just got us some money.
so Couple,
So,
1,500, but that's good.
and then a
Okay.
couple
No,
things.
that's not working.
Did I- Wait. did
Why
I-
is it a 400% change?
Because it
More
went from
people.
1,000.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah, it's calculating it. I think that's right.
So then a couple of things on,
This is Lisa. I'd like to hear what John Lynn has to say.
John, go ahead.
Thanks. Back to the police budget lightning rod thing. Are we still paying to maintain 5 vehicles if we reduce down to 3 full-time and 1 part-time officer? Are we going to sell a vehicle? Is that savings in insurance, repairs, tires, fuel represented in the budget? If not, could that go toward the administrative assistant? And when we're looking at the hourly rate for officers, does that include the cost of the vehicle and all those other expenses?
So on vehicles, Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, we had 6, we sold 2, we're down to 4. And
And we're not.
Anthony, you can follow along.
Yeah.
So then, so we have 4 right now, so I guess if we went down to 3.
Well, we wouldn't want to get rid of a vehicle because if our intent is to fully staff their union contract says they have to have a vehicle.
If we were going with the 3.5 to 4 idea, then yes, we want to keep that. And then we also,
The Tesla.
So it's a matter of, do we budget for 3 with still the hopes of getting 4? And if a 4th one comes along, we figure out how to pay for it. If our intent is to lower the staff in the police department, then we can address the police cruiser issue.
But John's question is specific to police cruiser repair, tires and maintenance. So if we have less cruisers, he's asking if those lines should be reduced because we'll have less repair, maintenance, tires.
I think he's looking at.
Depends on
body
how long
cameras,
they've been
equipment.
sitting there.
That's true also.
You know, like one of the cruisers has been sitting there a while and is in pretty rough shape. That'd be the first to be replaced.
But we're having somebody go ahead and turn them over into the 450 Dolphin, right?
yeah, and I think that Chief can talk to it, but we're your guys are driving those as well to keep them exercised.
Yeah, I mean, right now they're primarily driving Heinsberg cars, but with that said, I've taken very good care of the cars and we are driving them a little bit. So I mean, we've done tire rotations and oil changes and everything's fixed from when they were sitting, let me put it that way. There is one vehicle that didn't fare as well as the Tesla and the two Durangos. That's the 2019 Ford. But it's where it's as good as it's gonna get, let me put it that way. And also, I mean, if there's three, I kind of got a little confused on where you guys were going, but if there's three officers and they all have a take-home car, and let's say hypothetically there was a fourth part-time, that officer would not have a car because all the other ones are take-home. So there theoretically would always have to be a fourth if there was more than three officers.
And just back to, I still have the employee numbers up and we had 3 and 1, so. But that's part-time admin presumably, but if we go back to the 3.5, that's sort of where we might be headed. Is it 3 or 4 or 3.5, which is a position for half of the year for budgeting purposes? That would suggest we not get rid of a vehicle at this point. Is that reasonable?
I would say the cars are being very well taken care of, and we're not going to get any money from maybe a max of $5,000 from selling it, or from selling any of them. I would suggest certainly not messing with the car. If they were sitting like they were before, I would say let's, and that's why we ended up getting rid of number 5 and 6. But there's no danger right now of the brake seizing up or anything. It's an investment that the town took, and I think that long term we should get our money's worth out of that investment.
Anthony, on the cruiser tires, did we zero that out because we just bought a bunch of new ones this year?
I think we wrapped it into repair, didn't we?
We changed, yeah, we shifted it over.
Oh, that's
to-
right. Yeah,
That was like 3 months ago, but I think that's what happened.
yeah.
Bart?
Is-
This
is
is
the
the
con-
reason, but do we run snow tires year round like the state troopers apparently do?
No.
We I'm not sure what the previous chiefs were doing, but come late October, I put snow tires on all the cars, studded snows, and come the spring, I changed them back to summer tires. The winter tires and the summer tires get saved, so nothing, it's not like we're buying new tires every year.
Thank you.
John?
Is the cost of the cruisers included in the hourly rate of the officer? Because an admin cost wouldn't have that, and an officer does.
No.
No, the officer is just wages and benefits, total compensation.
So it's a pretty huge difference in cost hourly then for an admin person versus an officer, if you include all the expenses, because we're required to own and maintain another vehicle for that officer.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Kara?
You also have all the equipment to suit up that officer and all the other line items like the cameras and all that kind of stuff, John. So I just wanted you to know it's not just about a cruiser. But back to more questions about your budget and things like that. You've got building maintenance in like your fire department and like your highway department and stuff like that. Do we have and only I'm asking this because I'm on the town center committee and I'm finding that we're recommending some basic maintenance be done, that they're going to actually be spending the budget. And I see you've increased that budget for the town center. So kudos to you and thank you. I just want to make sure that somebody's managing these maintenance line items that don't always get spent, in case there's actually maintenance that they should be doing that's not getting done because they're afraid to spend money when it's actually in the budget. So I want to just make sure somebody is managing the maintenance line items on the town assets. And that they're getting maintenance done. If the fire department needs something done, or if the highway needs something done, I really don't want them to hold off on that.
Yeah, so in fire, it's Chief Guile and his staff that look at the building and make suggestions on what needs to get repaired or replaced. In highway, it's Pete and his staff looking at the building. I will say neither one of them is shy about coming to me with requests and ideas of what they need for the building to be in better shape. So,
If they only spent 6,600 out of the 10,000 in FY24, I don't know if they have anything planned for FY25. So if you need something done, I'm hoping you're getting it done. And if you don't,
What's that amount in FY?
where's
What do we have budgeted right now?
in fire department?
it's $10,000.
$10,000 still, okay.
It's back up, Josh.
Back up, I'm sorry.
It's up.
Maintenance general.
Yep, you spent 6,600 and you've got a full 10,000 for FY25 and we're 5 months in. So if you need something done, I hope you do it.
Well, I mean, this one, the note is that there is a need for a new water line. And that'll come off of that hydrant,
Right.
right? And I don't know if there's any other, I mean, you did the roof a little while ago.
Another one, for a while, for the town's not doing big new water line for the station.
Right, that's the water line to here. I think you did the roof recently.
Small,
Did you not?
small roof.
Small roof, so then you have the larger roof.
Main
right,
roof
like
still
the
needs to be
first one.
done.
Yeah.
Which is gonna be well above the $10,000.
Probably 40, 50 grand, I imagine. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
Just the last thing that I have that I just wanted to follow up on is I know you guys have talked about inventories
Mhm.
on, I mean, you've got small equipment purchases up to $7,000 in the highway department and other supplies and things like that. And some of the supplies line items are $1,000, but they've only spent 200. Is there any, I know you've asked for it for years. I don't know if you actually ever got an inventory of small equipment and mowers and all of that kind of thing. Do you have that inventory right now?
So we don't have the smaller stuff, but we have mowers, we have trucks, we have larger equipment, but we don't.
Chainsaws,
I
those kinds of things,
Is there
that's
like a-
smaller equipment.
Is there like a ballpark dollar threshold that we're kind of, what is our, I'm assuming there is, right? Most companies have like a threshold or places where you like manage it.
For what we count.
Yeah, like what you put like an asset tag on versus what you kind of like.
Was it
write off.
$5,000 and up is what goes under the capital plan. So, you know, I can't tell you exactly how many chainsaws fire department or highway has.
We would have done it as part of, remember when we updated
How
the
you do.
VLCT? stuff a few
VLCT,
years
a couple
ago?
years ago, they had to
counted
count every
everything.
screwdriver, which was,
Inventory of everything they have at fire station a couple years ago.
so that was for the insurance review. So we do have that from that year.
Yeah, but I wanted that updated.
I don't know that it was updated every year.
So thank you. I appreciate you guys reviewing this budget, answering my questions. I appreciate you doing that.
The building maintenance under for this building is directly offset on the revenue side. And it's
Right.
basically general maintenance, light bulbs,
And that
Things
comes
like
out
that.
We're
of.
talking
and it
about-
comes out of the
it comes out
town
of the
center.
center.
Okay, they're talking about this building, not fire department, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, only this building, yeah.
Bart?
So a topic that we pick up and then drop and then pick up and then drop is the budget for the town center overall. Do we want to talk briefly about that? I mean, we know we have the vote that for significant funding that failed. We want to at least mention where we are regarding that. This building.
Sorry, I just want to get to the line, what am I missing? So you're talking like town building maintenance?
Now,
Yeah.
is the town center building pulled out from the town center campus, or are the library and the town center groups in those budget items?
The budget is not tied to the town center fund.
Okay,
But the line item 10,710,262 of the 25,000 for building maintenance on admin is the building maintenance
building.
for this building, is my understanding.
Right, and if we use the whole 25,000, we offset it by 25,000 off. So whatever we use on the expense side, we offset up to 25,000 on the revenue side.
So part of my point, David, is that's sort of the maintenance, not the upgrade, which
Right.
sort of pushed forward a little bit. And so it's reassuring that we can fix things that break or deal with stuff like,
You've upped it. Thank you.
this is money to maintain the town center,
Not to
as
improve it.
Andy pointed out, it's not really money to fix the town center.
Correct.
I mean, I guess there's some semantics there. But I imagine what he meant was like rehab, and
I
this is
think
not a rehab.
It's the big picture. So do we want to just talk briefly? This is not budgeted. We have the vote that failed.
Right.
And we have not resurrected a vote or a plan on how to deal with that
Right.
at this point in time, right?
Right.
And I think a good way to look at this is like if we had a repair of the elevator or something that got damaged or a repair of the heater, that comes out of building maintenance, but we recently went out to RFP for a new lock security system and video cameras. That will be a separate vote to come out of the town center reserve fund. Probably next meeting. But just to give people an idea of like where we differentiate.
And so we have other projects too coming down, like fixing the brick on the outside and those types of things
Yeah.
would be out of the reserve fund, right? Not,
Yeah, I mean, that, the
Generally,
brick, I
could
think
go
the
either
brick
way.
you could probably argue is building maintenance because it needs to be done. It's not really an upgrade.
it's a good point.
But when you start, it depends also on the cost of that. If that comes in at $5,000, I think it's easy to put into the building maintenance line. If it's $20,000, we probably need to have a separate conversation.
Well, it also would matter if we were maxed. So if we had already maxed our expense line
That's true.
and there
too.
were bigger things, then we would ask that it comes straight, not as an offset in the budget, but as a direct payment out of the town center, whether it be for the library or the town center. Like a furnace goes or something like that.
Where does the revenue that offsets this come from? And is that revenue
Right.
So that revenue is not variable.
Right.
So budgeting more money here and offsetting it doesn't change.
Correct.
We take the same amount of money in no matter what, we just choose to put it towards this offsetting or something else or.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it offsets from the town center fund, which, yeah, is funded by Branson, which is about $100,000 a year, I think, between
So increasing this
post office
just
and everything.
in a roundabout way decreases the amount of money we have available in the reserve in some capacity.
And we'll go to the reserve anyway. If there's a larger ticket item that we need to have, we'll come to the board and say, there's a hole in the roof or what, I don't know what it could be. We gotta fix it. The air conditioner is fixed.
Or buy a tarp.
There you go. Well, there's a number of options from inexpensive to expensive.
Have a meteor come through.
And moving it to the 25,000 though, it truly shows you that we should be
Yeah.
spending that for a minimum of maintenance a year on this building. And that we shouldn't just be putting it in a budget and then never
Squirreling it
spending
away
and
and
then go,
have to-
wow, the building. So, and I think the other message it sends is that the committee is fully aware that larger projects than basic maintenance go back to the select board for approval. It might not be to a level of going to a vote, but it goes back to the select board to say, can you use $30,000 out of the reserve to do whatever's determined that is a larger scale project. And I think the committee is, and I can speak as a committee member, that we're fully aware of that, and we appreciate you making that line item expense and more in line with some of the work that's going to be done in FY 26.
So what's next?
Where do you want to go?
Let's pick on the library.
Do we-
She's been sitting here for quiet all night.
You can skip that.
Do we want to, I don't know, do we want to look at if we added admins back in or made some other changes, what would that do to the tax rate? Just to sort of
I guess,
get some direction from where we want to go with the next iteration.
I mean, I know Anthony would advocate for another officer and an admin, obviously, from a cost benefit standpoint, knowing that ultimately we'd like that, but we do have a constraints. If having an admin for an hour frees up a police officer for an hour, it seems to be a very cost-effective way to ease Anthony's burden and also free up officer time. And also,
I asked him that question.
and he did say he wanted another officer.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
But that said, if we're wanting ponies and stuff, I think it's a good point.
Start with the smaller pony.
Yeah, 20 hours a week is the lowest hanging fruit, the biggest return for the investment.
And every time we ask Anthony of all the admin stuff that he's just tied up at his desk doing, it's a lot.
So the question is then perhaps, we're not at 0. We're currently sitting at 20 for admin and 3 at officers, right?
in this iteration of the
Yeah.
budget, yes.
So like one approach is based on at least the feedback from the chief is should we, as Connie eloquently described it, a half position is not a half position for 12 months. It's a funded position for 6 months. Do we want to contemplate that and leave admin at 20
Right.
or
but
something else?
The half position is 53,787.
I would still like to go higher than 20, but I'm just one member.
But we haven't had 20 in a long time.
Oh, I know.
I'm
Also-
just gonna state the obvious.
Unless we have
We're at
20,
7.12 and trying to go down. Now it looks
Yeah.
like we're trying to go up.
I mean, but but these are good questions about like, what do we need and what do we want? So if we add 53,787 in, we
Oh.
can get us,
It disappeared in his picture.
if we add the 53,787 in, just to people
Oh,
understand
to your
for what
point.
that does. That ends up,
Materialized.
wait a minute, why did that not flow through?
it's free. It's great.
I must have removed a.
Keep adding stuff quick while we can do it.
Go ahead,
I didn't
Anthony.
Remove my formulas.
Mine's there though. We got 8.58.
Okay, so something happened with my formulas that I don't. Okay.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that my logic behind it is, there's so much more I can do with an officer. I can't have an admin go take a call, but I can have an officer do admin and take a call. So my logic is it's always a greater value for me to have an officer, especially now as the call volume is increasing. That was sort of my logic behind saying I would definitely want an officer before having an admin.
Kara?
I'm gonna give pushback. If you wanna look at I want a full police department, don't get me wrong. But you haven't had a full police department, even in FY 24. You had a police officer that you paid $20,000 salary to, and it costs you $80-something thousand in other expenses to have that police department, plus the $386,000 it costs you to pay to Heinsberg. So I would love for you to have fully staffed police department, but you haven't. And it's not fair to the taxpayers to put in 4 officers or 3.5 officers and a full 40-hour admin when you don't have that. So you're going to hire a 40-hour admin for 1 officer of what you've got right now, because you only have 1 officer. You've been saying you lost an officer and gained an officer last year, right?
Well, and a canine too, Kara.
Right? Well, you gave, okay, I'm
No,
assuming.
but yeah,
he's
so
not
yeah,
working on his
we're
own.
still at 1.
So we're
yeah.
still at 1. So your net gain is 0. So I support you budgeting 3 officers, because you have a couple, every year we get at budgeting season, you got a couple that are just lined up. Go back
That's a
and
good
watch the
point.
videos, okay? I want you to be fully funded. I want him to have a department to have to run. But you can't, you're not filling them, and you haven't filled them, and that's where we have a problem with the shell game that I don't like. So build in 3, get all 3, be ready to hire the 4th in FY 27. Prove it. Go to 40 hours with your admin in FY 27 after you've proven you had 3 officers and you had somebody working 20 hours a week. But stop budgeting artificially into budgets for positions that aren't coming to fruition and haven't for years. Thank you.
Does Heinz, so I think part of what I've heard talked about the admin too is that we budget 20 and Heinsberg budgets 20 hours. So I've heard that mentioned, but is that an idea? Is that a reality? Is that a goal?
So I had that conversation with
A
Heinz.
full-time admin position would be more useful, but it also probably be easier to fill because I know a lot of people are looking for full-time work. Finding someone who's qualified that wants 20 hours a week seems harder to
So
accomplish.
just before budget season really started, I had that conversation with the town manager over in Heinsberg, and I think he was open to the idea, but didn't really currently have it in the budget. And my understanding of where their budget is right now is, I don't think they have it in the budget, is what in their,
Okay.
where they stand in their police department, but
Brandon, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks. I just maybe a point of clarification here as we're debating the trade-offs between an officer or admin support. If our premise is that there is at least 20 hours of admin work to do, and I think, Anthony, to your point, you can do a lot more with an officer, but if there's that 20 hours that we need to support from an admin perspective, are we necessarily paying someone more than we need to get that admin work completed? I just think I'm all about efficiency, and that's something that comes to mind if we're overpaying for admin work that needs to happen for somebody that to your point can do a lot more, but that's just, I think, something we should be calling out here.
Bart?
David, one of the things I'm wrestling with is how many FTEs admins does it take to support a person? Or 1.5 people, or 2 people? I think that there is a sort of correlation or an association with how many FTE officers there are with how much work there is for
It's a very good point.
the admin person.
Chief, go ahead.
I think I understand where everyone's coming from as of what we look like right now. However, with the current budget talks and current budget situation in Heinsberg, I'm predicting expected losses to my to my Heinsberg side. And if that happens, let me put it this way, I've pretty much been patrolling both towns 80 square miles with what I used to patrol just Heinsberg with. So if there's losses of officers due to budgetary issues on the Heinsberg side, obviously Richmond, Heinsberg wasn't able to cover. Obviously, Richmond wouldn't have contract money to pay, but I don't want to hurt in the area of can we respond to calls and can we cover the amount of hours that we need to cover for the upcoming year. So I've had concerns about an admin for a very long time, but I'm getting to the point now where that's the least of my worries considering what's potentially on the horizon.
Thank you. Connie?
Anthony, does the admin person require special certifications and trainings, and because they have access to pretty confidential data? I remember Diane saying there was a lot of certifications that she had.
Yes, I send them to training, and then a big portion of it is just me and usually my sergeant training them in how to do things, how to process tickets and crashes and things that but absolutely they're going to have to get fingerprinted, and they're going to have to go through a class on how to use the police database and get authorizations to use it. So absolutely, there's definitely going to be some things.
Talked about a lot and haven't got anywhere.
Yeah, and I got my formulas back too. I think Connie already said it, but I don't know what happens. So this budget sheet, sometimes it will literally just, like, the formulas drop out, and that was weird, it dropped out. They were there when I opened the meeting and then they went away. So when I made those other 2 changes that we had, the small one in planning and zoning and the small one over in revenue for the electric charging station, if we add in that half an officer, then we're at 8.58% increase. So like Connie said, we're going the wrong way by about 1.3%. But to look at what it would cost, that's where we'd be.
We worked really, really hard in the last 2 weeks, countless hours to try to get to 3.5, and this was the best we could do, and that's scratching up everything. And my fear is where we're going to be next year. I know we're focused on this budget, but in my world, I'm looking 5 and 10 years out, saying, where are we going to be financially? And our unassigned situation is gonna be even worse next year.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I did put in the memo was that we'd also looked at highway equipment reserve. We could reduce that by an additional 35,000, which leaves 4,000 at the end of FY 26 and gets us to negative 27 in FY 27. So we could get through our truck purchases in FY 26. We'd have to make sure we quickly replenish that for future purchases in 27. But it is a potential extra $35,000 if we wanted to
Like
reduce
pulling
that.
out of these reserves is kind of,
Well, that's reducing a contribution.
yeah.
So
we're
it's,
not, sorry, that was the wrong wording, but
Sorry.
reducing, I mean, I don't know, we can do that, but if we don't have a plan to not buy things down the road, we're just kicking the can down the road and screwing ourselves. So if we want to change the equipment purchase schedule, if we want to do something like that and coordinate that with a reduce in the contribution, but just reducing the contribution and not changing when we're going to buy equipment is
Yeah.
not a recipe for success.
and I would, highway, I think, is really fine tuned to their equipment replacement schedule. And they put tons of hours on those machines, so I would not want to do, so like, yeah, if we did that, I'd say, I don't want to touch their schedule, we'd have to find $27,000 in next year's budget if we reduce by 35 this year, so I hear you, I just wanted to throw it out.
Not
there.
that that makes it easier this year, but
Yeah.
It's when had COVID and the purchases got delayed. A 1-year delay on their schedule cost us thousands in repairs, like Pete just has that.
I mean, I know
Down
fire
as
department.
far as not having expensive repairs and getting a good return on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fire department's running into that now too in a different magnitude, but with their rescue truck, it's old, beat up, stuff's breaking, and it's
Yep.
to the point that it's costing a lot to fix. And also in the fire department's a little bit different calculation, because if it doesn't work one day when you need it, there's also not just an opportunity cost there, there's a cost to potential lives, so.
Look
But yeah.
at what the 2005
Yeah.
truck is costing us
Exactly.
now, a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Kara?
I think the only other thing to think about is the time value of money. So you're banking reserve monies, and you have to understand that the concept of time value of money, right? And so not all towns pay cash. We used to have loans on some of our equipment. And the fact that we're banking money to pay for something in the future, I think you just gotta watch that, because with this unassigned funds and this vacancy savings that we've had in the police department, you've now increased your budget everywhere else, and it's gonna catch up to you. So that's why I'm just saying you have to really be cautious by line item and where your spending is going, and be cautious that if it's a year, maybe you don't put money in a savings account, just like everybody's budget at home. If you have increased expenses, you don't necessarily bank as much as you've always been banking. I think there's some of those pieces to the puzzle that you've got to realize, and hitting the taxpayers with an 8% increase when your goal was 3.5% as a select board says you're not kind of really doing your job too well if you can't meet your own goal. So I'm just putting it out there that you just got to be, I don't mean to be drilling down on the budget for you. I'm just trying to help you think about things, because I don't want you to be kicking the can down the road and then all of a sudden, boom, what happened to everybody's budgets, and there's major problems and such.
All right.
It is a truth that not that many years ago that typically we bought stuff by borrowing money versus saving it and paying in cash. And there are obviously trade-offs to that. Connie, I know you've really been thoughtful about this. I'm also conflicted because essentially, if you collect the money in advance, you're taxing people, especially some of the older people on fixed incomes. You're taxing them to purchase something that they may never benefit from. And I appreciate from a business perspective, you want to save it and not pay the interest. But from an individual taxpayer perspective, some of those folks I'm contributing to buying a new truck that like I'll never see the benefit from. Either I will have moved away or I will have passed on. And I'm not sure what right sweet spot is, but that sort of illustrates, I think, the point that Kara was just making. Like,
Well, that's why I'm talking about maybe that Southview Bridge. We don't do as paying cash for. We do it as a loan, because that's a project. It's not a piece of equipment. And that is gonna make things easier for when we're doing the fiscal year 27 budget.
So let's do that.
Well, that's,
Well, there we go.
doesn't really help our 26.
It doesn't help us. It doesn't help get that number down, but I mean, it'll help us next year.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Bart, that person who's retired is going to keep getting hit with tax increases that you're just saving their money when they could be saving their own money.
I will say though, with the capital plan, just about all of it, a purchase is happening within 5 years. As you go from department to department, we're putting in reserves. We're not putting in reserves to buy something 20 years from now. We got the reserves in a good place that we're buying a dump truck in 26, or even the cruisers. We're buying one cruiser in 26. We're buying 2 cruisers in 27. I take that back. We're not buying any cruisers in 26, but there's nothing that we're budgeting. The killer is the fire department. Those purchases are really, they're
Huge purchases.
Scale.
they're really high.
Yeah.
So trying to raise enough reserve money in 5 years to pay for $1 million truck stings.
Should we pause there and contemplate that? And
Yeah.
I'll just, to be upfront personally, David, I think we should buy the right equipment at the right time for the fire department. But I'm currently agnostic about how much should it be stuff we've saved before the purchase and how much should it be borrowed at the time of purchase.
I mean, I
Should we
think
look
that
at that.
in the highway budget, Pete has it dialed in so well that I'm very comfortable with the reserves because he has it very well figured out. In the fire department, some of our trucks last longer than others. Some need to be replaced much sooner, as we found out with the brush truck and all that. So there does seem to be wiggle room that would give us flexibility both directions. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
With that said, you got a truck coming in 27 that's already been ordered.
last year too, right? So
So if we are going to switch to a loan, that would definitely be an article we would want to
well, I think
happen.
that we would want
With this
to at
coming
minimum stay the course on that, and then
I don't think it hits us yet for that one. I think it's more further out, but maybe we should pull up the reserves and the capital plan.
Well, you tell me where you want me to
Fire.
focus.
And Adam, to your point about the highway dialed in and stuff like that, I just historically with the highway, we started with having, and you all can correct me if my memory is failing me here. We started with like a used excavator and then we bought a newer used excavator and now we only buy new.
Mhm.
So we're in a cycle now, which new and new might last a little bit longer than what the used that we used to buy last. So I might want to, sometimes you don't need brand new as early as what your capital plan was.
my excavator has 31,000 hours on it, so.
Okay.
Right, gotta
Good.
ask, but
Okay,
it's ugly too.
What color is
I
it?
think our excavator is used. isn't it?
Rust red.
Isn't our new one a used one?
He is, I
Is
thought,
he still here?
I
Yeah.
think it's new, but people know for sure. He's.
I
It was the
can
demonstrator.
pull up the capital plan.
Oh, there I am. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the question about the excavator? Sorry, I was doing other stuff.
new.
Is it the one that we have right now? Do we buy that new or do we buy it used?
We bought that brand new. We traded in a used machine that had almost 7,000 hours. That had generated almost $70,000 worth of income just off of flood repairs. We paid $100,000 for the used one. Every wheeled machine that we've owned has 3/4 of the payback on that has been generated on flood repairs. So these machines pay for themselves, in my opinion, plus all the other, scheduled town work that we do with it.
I'm just gonna not disagreeing with you, Pete, but having worked in excavation for a bunch of years, I mean, when I worked at Shank and for McDonald, we would have like tons of equipment, dump trucks that had been overhauled that had like 900,000 local haul miles on them and cats with 25,000 hours on the same engine and stuff. So I'm just curious why we're trading stuff in at 7,000 hours. Was it like an upgrade because we needed a different piece of equipment, or what was the logic there?
So we are not a profit business, so we can't roll profits back into repairs like SD Ireland and all the big contractors can. We replace this equipment on a curve when it's going to give us the highest return on our investment. So we're getting about 60% back on these machines. Our trucks have a 7-year cycle on them because our warranties cover only 7 years. You know, we keep a really tight maintenance budget. I don't go over it much more than $2,000 or $3,000 annually. You know, if we started exceeding the hours on any of this equipment, we could easily have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 repairs out of nowhere, an engine or a major component or a hydraulic pump. So keeping this stuff within a certain time frame, and when it's got its highest return value, running hours and dollar return investment is best for the town. This has been, we've gone through this with all of our equipment, and it seems to be we run a pretty solid capital principal and interest line. And if you look back through just even the last, 5 or 8 years, look at our equipment repair lines. We've only had a couple instances where we've had some major repairs, but most of the time we stay within a nice budgeted line. So that's really the bottom line. We don't have 5 certified diesel mechanics in the highway garage that can rebuild engines. We're not that type of business. And we don't have an extra $250,000 in profits to, all right, let's just rebuild this whole thing and get another 5 years out. It's just not that type of place. So
we're trading off, we're spending the money on a predictable cycle, knowing that we're kind of offsetting that with savings on, or not savings, but with lower maintenance and predictable costs, so we don't have to get hit with something major.
Well, exactly. And here's the big word, dependability. This is not so much the excavator, but those dump trucks are considered, in my opinion, they're emergency equipment. They need to be dealt with just like a fire truck. They need to run. Right now, for the next 4.5, 5 months, those trucks need to work. So, if they're 15 years old and needed major components replaced in them right now, where would we be? We'd be doing a disservice to the taxpayers, honestly. And that's how the place was when I started here. We had trucks that had, bungee cords on the doors and do not drive. And they were telling me, yeah, that's had 2 rear ends put in it. And the engine's been rebuilt. And, we put $40,000 in repairs and they're going to give us $8,000 in trade. It didn't take me very long to figure out somebody's not really figuring this out very well. So that's why we have a really aggressive replacement cycle and things are spaced out very well. And Kara's correct. Some of the stuff can go longer and it's based on hours. A lot of the stuff is based on hours and or miles. When it comes to the trucks, it's really the warranties, because with all the new emissions and all the new computer stuff and all the DEF and regeneration systems, just an exhaust system failure on, the diesel engines can be a $20,000 repair if it's out of warranty. So, we only have a $15,000 repair line for all those trucks. So, to me, it's really critical to keep those repair cycles within a certain time frame and keeping the replacements up. We got good equipment. We're doing good work with it, and it's dependable.
Yeah, Peter, I wasn't telling you need a 15-year-old truck. Please don't.
Oh,
take
no.
Take my
Absolutely.
comment the wrong way.
No, I didn't. No, like you said, newer stuff could probably go out further, and I think if you look like the excavator is like a 10-year replacement cycle. Same with the grader. That's quite a ways out there. But you get to a certain point with those heavy pieces of equipment, if you run them too long, get too many hours on them, the return on them, you're only going to get 20% back on it. And it's, if we can stay in the 40% to 50% return on them, we're getting the best use out of that vehicle and the least amount of expense into it. So
the excavator is on a 15-year replacement schedule.
Okay,
This could be
15, that's
23.
new.
We
You're
bought a 2021 excavator for $263,000 and traded in the excavator we had for $55,000.
that excavator we had, we paid 110,000. And I can go through records with the 4 or 5 FEMA claims, but I think I generated about $60,000 in hourly cost, me running that machine. So it's, besides all the town work, this was just FEMA related flood work. So it's a vital piece of equipment. And it's that machine, we've put almost 750 hours on it since July 10th to now, and it's running every day. It's been running every day. So do I want a 20-year-old machine? I couldn't depend on it to do what we're doing right now.
Thanks, Pete. Chief?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to, I'm about to log off. Wanted to make sure nobody had anything else for me.
No, I think we're good. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
No, what's my homework?
And do we want to have a meeting? We talked about next Tuesday. We have a regular meeting on Monday, do a Tuesday meeting as well for
I
budget.
think so, yeah.
And set a new record for meetings in December of the select board.
We've got an unusually
Flooding in the
difficult task
budget.
this year.
As do many towns.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess to Connie's point, what would you like to see for next meeting? Or do we all just want to try to think on it and come back with new ideas? I don't know. We threw a few things out
Yeah,
tonight.
there's a lot to think about.
Is there anything specific you want us to try to run, or if you can't think of anything now, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you go, aha, email us and we'll add it in.
It seems to me if there's an opportunity, it's contributions to reserves, and that's,
We've been through them.
yeah.
I mean, the bridge and culvert, we can help us next year, but I don't see any that can help us this year without putting us in the red for the next year.
I mean,
We're not contributing to police. Yes, there's cruisers we could take off the capital plan, but it
We're not.
doesn't do anything for this budget because we already took away the contribution.
Right.
And we can't borrow from
We
it.
can't underfund the police or the fire department because we're committed to the purchase already that we're
Yeah.
buying. with.
Well, right, not just. I mean, in regard to the flood itself, we're restricted to similar reserves. So the only reserves that we could actually borrow and expense to are the bridge and culvert and the special funds projects one that we just created.
We could, theoretically, if we weren't committed to spending the fire department money, we could not fund that reserve though. Lower the
Right.
budget.
but that, we did look at that.
Not suggesting we do. that.
No,
I'm saying
we-
we're
I
constrained because
actually-
We are committed, we've committed the money, we need that money or we will default on a contract, right?
Exactly. I mean, I actually sort of ran that with Connie to say, well, what if we contributed less? Came with the same answer. And that's what led me to highway, where I was like, well, if we reduce that by 35,000, it stays positive through 26, which allows all of our purchases in 26, but we have to make it up in 27 to stay on schedule. But we don't have contracts out like we do in fire. So it was sort of like trying to figure out what bottom of what barrel can I scrape to try to pull something else out, and sort of where I went.
And for that specific highway reserve, it's predicated on the idea that somewhere between now and fiscal year 27, real time, we'll be getting FEMA money.
That
Yeah.
exactly is how that's how I would repay that.
Yeah.
That theoretically.
And we can go back to loans. I don't know as though that helps us in this budget,
No.
but.
No,
Well, I
we
mean,
I think we showed what it was 15 years. I showed that we spent $1 million in interest alone.
I mean, it could potentially help us, because that would be the other option, is if we couldn't make up, so if we did the 35,000 for highway reserve and we couldn't make up that 27,000, we could take a loan for one of those pieces of equipment, which would then have ripple effects in future years and kind of get away from where we've been going, but it would be, it's not like we wouldn't buy the truck in 27, we just have to find another way to do it.
Can we take a loan on the fire truck, even though we've already, we've contracted to buy it? Can we go to the people
Mhm.
to ask to take a loan
Yeah,
rather than
we-
using
That's not saving
reserves?
anyone any money
Well,
though.
yeah, and I
Like,
think
if we're
real
like-
quick,
if
and I
we're-
know Carol wants to speak, I think we did talk about that too, and then we thought, well, if we spend it in this budget, go to the voters in March to take a loan and it fails,
Oh, right.
then we have a contract with no way to pay for it. And that's not a good.
Well, in the most basic level, I mean, even though the tax rate would go down, we would still be charging the taxpayers the same amount of money. So it's not saving it. That would just be
Other
really
way to look at it.
disingenuous way to like lower the budget.
Yeah.
You pay more in the end.
Right. We pay more.
It costs you more than the.
Sarah?
So, the 22%, over 22% increase on administration salaries that you have right now, all the other departments don't have that high a jump. You just had the compensation review done where we're compared to other towns. Do we know how many other towns have a town manager, a deputy town manager, and an assistant admin that are our size?
I don't know.
Can we, I'd like you to reconsider that line item. I'd like you to reconsider that line item and know that what other towns around have, if that are our size, do they have a town manager, a deputy town manager, and an assistant admin?
We would be part of the increase though is because we're upping it a grade. If we take away the
Well-
admin position, we're gonna be way less hours than we already are, and we already need more.
Right, I mean, like right now, without Lynn's position, which we added as temporary part-time to cover.
FEMA.
Yeah, it's FEMA, it's EWP programs, it's elevations. Well, actually, it's not all FEMA. It's primarily doing the minutes, it's doing the EWP programs, it's doing the elevations, doing the buyouts. Duncan's still doing FEMA because he's started to run with it already. He's really good at it. He's super.
With elevation and buyouts for FEMA, is what I was.
Right, sorry, but like there are a few different pots of money there. So, yeah, I mean, if we looked at going back to in the budget, back to an assistant to the town manager, which is Duncan's current position at 30 hours a week. I think it would be hard, if not impossible, to get to the buyouts and elevations and the WP stuff. And as we look at the request to try to like do more RFPs to better manage this building, to better manage other things, to look at installations in the park, to manage those processes. There's a lot that continues to come in that we're trying to accomplish. So, we could look at if we said, okay, Duncan's position goes to 40 hours and we don't have the assistant, it would save us like $35,000, I think is what it is. But there's a lot that comes in. There's a lot we don't get to right now that I wish we could get to.
I think you also need to look at some efficiencies in your systems. From your technology standpoint, I think there's some cost savings there in hours and stuff like that, that if you're not using updated software and you aren't trained on updated software, that is taking you more hours to do things than what it could. So I strongly recommend that. But if you're looking at all of your departments and all of your departments are trying to stay at that 3.5% and your town admin department is jumping way up, that's just a red flag for some people. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Also, part of it is also that because we're gonna have a vacant position, any of our vacant positions, we budgeted a 2-person health insurance, which could make a huge difference, because you could end up getting somebody on a single plan that costs $15,000, or you could get somebody on a family plan that costs over $30,000. So that's part of why it's up, because we're budgeting for a vacant position.
Anything else for tonight? I suggest we adjourn.
Second.
You can't make a motion.
First. I make a motion. I
second.
follow your suggestion, make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn has been made. Please.
Discussion?
No.
Come on. All right.
I'm discussed out.
Adam, I.
Thanks, everybody.